The wind in Anima's crossing never rested. It was late August, 1887, and the air, baked dry by the Colorado sun, tasted like pulverized rock and the stale sweat of horses. The town itself was a fresh wound clawed from the raw slopes of the San Juan Mountains, a place built on the frantic promise of silver and the impending scream of the railroad. Law was a thin, dusty rumor, easily lost in the constant racket of the stamp mill crushing ore up the canyon, or the roar of the saloon after sundown. Clara Mayfield kept her back to the street, her needle a silver flicker in the gray light. Her small seamstress shop was wedged between the land office and a blacksmith, and the walls vibrated with every strike of the hammer. At 22, she was a creature of intense, brittle practicality. She had to be. Her father, a man who built empires in his mind and ruins at his feet, had left her nothing else to inherit but his debts. Her fingers, calloused at the tips but nimble, flew across a patch on a heavy canvas ore wagon cover. She stitched, and in her mind, she read, tucked beneath a bolt of calico, hidden from the casual judgments of the town, was a worn copy of Middlemarch. She had borrowed it. Her father would have used the word stolen from the single dusty shelf in the back of the post office that grandly called itself the town library. She lived in those pages, 5 minutes at a time. She understood Dorothea Brooke, a woman brimming with a life of the mind, only to find herself fenced in by the small ambitions of small men. Clara's world was one of numbers. She knew that a spool of thread cost 2 cents, that kerosene for her lamp was $1 a gallon, and that her father's final, catastrophic gambling debt to Silas Crowell amounted to $3,000. The bell above her door chimed. It was a cheerful, tinny sound, and it made her stomach tighten into a cold knot. She did not need to look up. The scent of expensive bay rum and fine tobacco cut sharply through the shop's familiar smells of cloth dust and soap. "Miss Mayfield, diligent as ever." His voice was smooth, oiled, like a well-maintained rifle. Silas Crowell. He owned the bank that held her father's markers. He owned the land office next door. He was in partnership with the railroad men who were, at this very moment, deciding the fate of the entire valley. He was, in every way that mattered, the master of Anima's Crossing. "Mr. Crowell," she said, her voice flat. She did not stop stitching. "This cover is promised by 5 o'clock. "Ah, practicality," he murmured. His polished boots made almost no sound on her plank floor. A most admirable trait in a woman. He did not look at her. He stopped by the far table. On it, gleaming like a patch of snow in the dim shop, lay a massive bolt of white silk. It was untouched, pristine. "I see my gift arrived safely," he said. Clara's needle paused. A fractional hesitation. The wedding. Her wedding. Tomorrow. "It is beautiful, Mr. Crowell," she said. The words tasted like iron filings. "Only the finest." He smiled, a thin, dry pressing of his lips that showed his teeth but held no warmth. He was a collector. He was acquiring her, just as he had acquired the bankrupt silver claim up the gulch, just as he was acquiring vast tracts of land from the land office he himself owned. Her father, a broken, weeping, and profoundly relieved man, had signed the papers 2 weeks ago. Clara Mayfield, in exchange for the nullification of his debt. "You are very generous," she said, forcing the practical words out. "I am a man who believes in investment. My dear, I am investing in this town. I am investing in the railroad. And I am investing in you." He reached out, not to touch her, but to run a single, possessive finger down the edge of the silk. "I trust all the arrangements are in order. Your father seemed most pleased." Pleased? Her father was a ghost, grateful to be unburdened of the life he had ruined. Clara felt a brief, hot surge of anger, but she quilted it down with practiced efficiency. Anger was a luxury she could not afford. Practicality was survival. "Everything is in order, Mr. Crowell." "Excellent." He turned, his gaze finally flicking to her. It was assessing, like a rancher judging livestock. "I shall see you at the church, 10 o'clock sharp." The bell chimed again, and he was gone. Clara let out the breath she had been holding for a full minute. She looked at the shimmering white silk. It was not a wedding dress. It was a receipt. 50 miles north. As the eagle flew, the air was different. On the high, jagged ridge known as Hawk's Spine, the wind was clean. It smelled of pine resin, cold stone, and the faint, metallic tang of snow that lingered in the shadows even in August. Elias McCrae, known to some as Red Elk, moved through an aspen grove with a silence that was part of the wind itself. He was a man of about 30, built lean and tough as harness leather. His skin held the bronze of his Cheyenne mother, and his eyes the startling, clear gray blue of his Scottish trapper father. He belonged entirely to both and fully to neither, which was why the mountains suited him. The mountain did not ask a man for his pedigree. He had worn the Army's blue coat for a time, down on the plains. He had been a scout, a translator, a bridge between two worlds. He'd believed in it. For a while. He'd stood beside a colonel and translated the fine, booming words of a treaty that promised the Cheyenne grazing rights in perpetuity. 6 months later, he'd guided that same colonel's patrol to relocate those same Cheyenne after gold was found on that same treaty land. The bridge, he'd realized, was a lie. He had walked away from the fort one night, leaving his blue coat folded on his bunk, and had never looked back. Now, he lived here. He hunted, he trapped. He panned just enough gold from the high, cold creeks to buy powder, coffee, and salt. He preferred the company of elk to the company of men whose words had no roots. He knelt by a game trail, checking a snare line. He found one rabbit, its neck broken clean. He reset the snare, whispering a quiet thanks in the language of his mother. He moved not like a man imposing himself on the land, but like a man asking its permission, careful not to scuff the moss. Rising, he scanned the vast panorama below. His eyes, trained to catch the flicker of a deer's ear at 500 yards, locked onto something wrong, not the distant smudge of Animus Crossing, but something else, a flicker of unnatural color in the low, wide valley to the east, Antelope Valley. He pulled a small brass spyglass from his pouch, bracing it against the white trunk of an aspen. Surveyors, a line of them, driving wooden stakes topped with bright orange flags. They were marking a line straight through the valley's heart. Elias's jaw tightened. That was the migration path. For generations, the elk herds had used that valley to move from the high country to the wintering grounds on the plains. It was their artery. It was also the heart of the hunting lands for Meco's people, the small, stubborn band of Cheyenne who still lived free, refusing the reservation. A rumor he had heard in town last month, one he had dismissed, came back to him. A rumor about the railroad, about Silas Crowell, about a massive land grab. But the railroad charts were public. They ran north, over the pass. These surveyors were not north of the pass. He skinned the rabbit with economical moves. His planned trip to town for supplies had just become urgent. He found Meco's camp in a grove of cottonwoods by the Animus River, miles upstream from the town. It was a small camp, just a few families, clinging to the old way of life. Meco was Elias's friend, closer than a brother, forged in the shared fire of disillusionment. He was young, but his eyes were ancient. He was scraping a deer hide, his movements sharp and angry. "I saw the flags," Elias said in Cheyenne, stepping into the clearing. Meco looked up, his face grim. "They say the Iron Horse is coming." "The path is wrong. The path is new," Meco said. He drove the scraping tool hard against the hide. "The banker, Crowell, he came here 2 days ago. He held up a paper. He said this land is his now, bought from the railroad. This is treaty land, Meco." "The treaty is paper." Meco threw the scraper to the ground. "He has newer paper. He wants the valley fenced. He told my cousin it would make a fine private hunting park for his rich friends from the east. The word fenced hung in the air, an obscenity, fencing the migration path, fencing the graves of Meko's ancestors. Elias felt the old, cold anger rise in him. This was the same lie, just written on a different piece of land. Before he could speak, the sound of shod horses crashing through the scrub made a nearby woman gasp and pull her child close. 3 riders appeared on the opposite bank. They did not attempt to cross the river, but sat their horses, a posture of lazy arrogance. Jeb Caro was in the lead. Caro was Crowell's boot, a man whose cruelty was his only real skill. He wore 2 pistols, tied low, and his eyes were small and restless. He was known for starting fights in the saloon, especially with men he perceived as weak, and he had a particular, sneering disdain for women. "Well, now," Caro shouted, his voice grating. "Looks like you heathens are slow learners. I thought I told you to clear out." Meko stood slowly. He was unarmed, save for the knife at his belt. "This is our land. Caro, the treaty." "The treaty." Caro spat a long, brown stream of tobacco juice into the clear river water. "I got your treaty right here." He laughed. His eyes roved the camp, lingering on Meko's young sister, who was trying to edge behind a drying rack. "Maybe you all need some encouragement. Crowell's a patient man, but I ain't. Maybe I ought to come over and encourage you proper." He spurred his horse, making it lunge into the edge of the water. The woman flinched. "Caro." The voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like the spyglass cutting distance. Elias McCrae stepped from the shade of the cottonwoods. He stood beside Meko. He held his rifle loosely in one hand. The barrel angled at the ground. He did not raise it. He just watched. Jeb Caro's hand, which had been drifting toward his pistol, tensed. He knew Elias. Everyone knew the quiet, half-breed scout from Hawk's Spine, a man who could not be bought, could not be threatened, and who shot with unnerving accuracy. "McCrae," Caro sneered, his bravado souring like old milk. "Crawled down from your rock, did you? You're mixing in business that ain't yours. This is Crowell's land now. We're clearing squatters." "Are you?" Elias said. It was not a question. The 2 men stared at each other across the 20 yards of rushing water. Caro, loud and brittle. Elias, silent and solid as the mountain behind him. Caro was the first to break. He could not hold that unwavering gray-eyed gaze. "You tell him," Caro snarled, jerking his chin at Meko. "Sundown tomorrow. Be gone, or we burn you out, and I'll enjoy it." He wrenched his horse's head around, kicking its flanks harder than necessary, and the 3 riders disappeared in a cloud of their own dust. Meko let out a long breath. "He feeds on fear." "He's a weak man," Elias said, his gaze fixed on the dust. "But a weak man with a strong boss is a dangerous tool." He looked downriver, toward the distant smudge of Animus Crossing. "This Crowell, he moves fast." "What can we do? Elias, he has the paper, he has the guns." "I do not know." Elias checked the load in his rifle. "But I am going to town. I need salt, and I need to see the master of this dog." Clara delivered the wagon cover at 5 minutes to 5. She collected her pay, $2.50, and walked back onto the main street. The stamp mill's relentless thud. Thud. Thud paused for the shift change, and the sudden, aching silence was filled by men shouting as they poured from the mine, their faces gray with rock dust. They made a straight line for the Silver Slipper Saloon. This was the town's lifeblood. Hard rock, hard work, hard drink. She hurried past the saloon's swinging doors, avoiding the stares and the raw laughter that spilled out. She stopped at the bank. Through the large, clean glass window, she saw him, Silas Crowell. He was not alone. He was sharing a cigar with a man in an expensive Eastern suit, a man she recognized as Mr. Harris, the chief surveyor for the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. They were laughing. as she watched. Crowell poured 2 glasses of whiskey. They raised them in a toast. They were toasting their success. A cold, dreadful certainty settled over Clara. It was all one thing. Her father's ruin, her forced marriage, the surveyors in the valley. On a sudden, sharp impulse, she crossed the street to the post office. Mrs. Gable, the postmistress, was sorting mail. Just checking for letters. Mrs. Gable. Clara murmured, though she hadn't received a letter in over a year. She slipped past the counter to the dark, dusty shelf in the back. She did not reach for a book. She stood in the shadows and listened. 2 ranchers were by the stove, their voices low. I swear it's true. Jed, Crowell filed the papers this morning, claims the whole of Antelope Valley. But that's Cheyenne land. Ain't it on the treaty? Treaty's just old paper. Crowell's got new paper, railroad paper. Says the line's being diverted right through the valley. Needs the land for staging and timber. A staging ground in the middle of that valley, that makes no sense. It's prime grazing, and it's the elk run. Don't matter. Crowell gets the land. And I heard he's celebrating proper, getting himself married tomorrow. To that little seamstress, Mayfield's girl. Guess he's celebrating all his new assets. The man's quiet chuckle hit Clara harder than a slap. She stood frozen, hidden by the shadows in the bookshelf. It was not a marriage. It was a victory lap. Her father's debt was just the leverage. The wedding was the celebration. He was stealing a valley, displacing a people, and marrying her as the final jewel in his new, dirty crown. She felt sick, but beneath the sickness, the practical, methodical core of her mind, the mind that counted stitches and pennies, the mind that understood Middlemarch, began to turn. Crowell was a man of paper. He had railroad paper. He had her father's markers. He was a meticulous man, a man who kept records. She thought of the bank. She thought of the large iron safe she had seen in his office, the time she had gone to beg for an extension on her father's loan. She was a practical woman. She knew the odds. She was one person, a woman with no standing and no money. Against the richest, most powerful man in town, it was impossible. But as she walked out of the post office, clutching the $2.50 in her hand, a new, terrifying, and distinctly impractical idea began to form. The wind hit her face, and for the first time, it did not feel like an assault. It felt like a call to arms. Silas Crowell's engagement party was not a celebration of love. It was a demonstration of power. He held it in the newly finished lobby of his bank, the air thick with the smell of sawdust, expensive whiskey, and the sweat of men who were drinking too much of it. Clara was required to be there. She stood beside him, her hand trapped in the crook of his arm, wearing a dark blue dress she had made herself. It was her best, but it looked drab beside the wives of the railroad men, who wore fashions from Denver and Chicago. Crowell introduced her to everyone. Mr. Harris, the railroad surveyor, the mayor, the mine superintendent. My bride-to-be, Clara Mayfield, he said over and over. His voice boomed with the proprietor's pride. She is the very picture of practicality, a true asset to this town, and to me. He laughed, and the men laughed with him. Clara smiled. It was a small, tight, painful expression she had practiced in her mirror. She felt like one of the stuffed, glassy-eyed deer heads mounted on the wall. Her mind, however, was not smiling. It was calculating. She watched him. She watched him take Mr. Harris into his private office at the back of the bank, the office with the large iron safe. She saw him gesture grandly, slap the surveyor on the back. They were drinking. Crowell was boasting. She waited. Her opportunity came an hour later. Crowell was loud, holding court by the punch bowl, telling a long, self-important story about his first land acquisition. He was flushed with whiskey and victory. Clara murmured to him, "Silas, I feel a little faint. The air is so thick. May I sit in your office for a moment, where it is quiet?" He barely looked at her. "Of course, my dear. Help yourself." He waved a dismissive, benevolent hand. He was too busy accepting congratulations to be bothered. She slipped away. The office was dark, smelling of his bay rum and cigars. A single lamp was turned low on his desk. She closed the door, her heart hammering so hard it hurt her ribs. She walked straight to the safe. She had no idea how to open it. She put her hand on the cold steel door, a desperate, foolish hope. She pulled the handle. It was not locked. He had been in it, likely showing Harris some document, and in his drunken arrogance, he had forgotten to spin the dial. He had merely swung the heavy door shut. Her hands shook. She pulled it open. It was dark inside. Papers, stacks of currency, canvas bags of coin, and a book, a dark green, leather-bound ledger. It was small, not like the massive bank ledgers, but a private one. She pulled it to the desk, under the lamp. She opened it. It was his handwriting, column after column of dates, names, and numbers. Her breath stopped. She saw the initials S.H., Surveyor Harris, beside them. A notation. $5,000. Re-Antelope Valley reroute authorization. She turned a page. Jeb Caro. $200. Relocation incentive for Cheyenne. She found her own father's name. $3,000. Debt erasure, re-CM, marriage contract. And then, the entry from yesterday. Mr. Finch, notary, $100. Remarriage license proxy and Antelope Valley deed certification. Note, detain Father Michael, Silverton errand, until midday, 24th. Tomorrow was the 24th. It was all there, a meticulous, horrifying record of his crimes. He was paying Harris to fake the railroad diversion. He was paying Caro to terrorize Mecco's people. He was buying her, and he was using a fake priest, Mr. Finch, the notary, to sign a document that was not just a marriage license, but the final, fraudulent certification for the land grab. Her signature, her marriage, was the last key he needed to make the theft legal. She did not hesitate. She did not tear out a page. She took the entire book. She looked around, desperate. Her dress was too tight to hide it. She blew out the lamp, plunging the office into blackness. She opened the door just a crack. The party was louder now. She slipped out, holding the ledger flat against her stomach, and walked straight to the back door of the bank. No one saw her. She ran down the dark alley, across the street, and into her own small, silent shop. She hid the ledger at the very bottom of her sewing basket, beneath scraps of canvas and bundles of thread. She went back to the party. She went straight to Silas Crowell's side. "Are you feeling better, my dear?" he asked, patting her hand. "Much better. Thank you," Clara said. Her voice was perfectly steady. Her smile was still pinned in place, but her eyes, in the whiskey and smoke-filled light, were stone. The morning of the wedding dawned hot and blinding. Clara had not slept. She sat in her small room behind the shop, watching the white silk dress hang from a hook on the wall. It looked like a ghost. Her father came in, his hands trembling. He was wearing his only suit, brushed clean but smelling of mothballs. "Clara, child, it is 10 o'clock. They are waiting. Mr. Crowell is waiting." "I am not going, Father," she said. His face, already pale, turned the color of ash. What are you saying? You cannot—" "Clara, he will ruin me. He will ruin us." "He has already ruined us," she said. "He is a thief." "He is a powerful man," her father wept, grabbing her arm. "What does it matter if he bent a few rules? That is how the world works. He is offering us security. He is offering you a fine life." "He is offering me a cage," she said, pulling her arm away. The shop bell chimed. Hard. The door to her room burst open. It was not Crowell, it was Jeb Caro. Behind him stood two women from the Silver Slipper Saloon, their faces hard with paint and indifference. "Mr. Crowell is getting impatient," Caro said, his eyes lingering on her, on the simple shift she wore. He sent these ladies to help you get ready. Seems you are running late." "Get out of my room," Clara said, her voice low. Caro laughed. He stepped inside. "I do not think you understand. You are getting married today, one way or another." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a confidential, greasy whisper. "Your father is a fool, but he is still walking. I would hate for him to have an accident. Tripping on the stairs, a stray bullet from a drunk miner. Happens all the time." Her father made a small, strangled sound. Clara looked at her father, then at Caro. The threat was as real as the gun on his hip. She had failed. She was trapped. "Fine," she said. "Leave. The women can stay. I will be ready in 5 minutes." Caro smiled. A flash of yellow teeth. "Good girl. Do not keep us waiting." He backed out, closing the door. One of the women grabbed the white silk dress. "Let's get this on you." They were rough, efficient. They pulled the dress over her head, their fingers pinching as they fastened the dozens of tiny pearl buttons up her back. The silk was heavy, suffocating. They pulled her hair back, pinning it so tightly her scalp ached. "Where is Father Michael?" Clara asked, her voice tight. The woman fastening her veil laughed. "Mr. Crowell found someone better. Mr. Finch. He's a notary. It is all legal and tidy. Now, stand still." Clara's blood ran cold. The ledger was true, every word. She looked at her sewing basket. Sitting by the door, the ledger was in there. The proof. "I need my mother's prayer book," she said. "You do not need anything," the woman said, yanking the veil. "I will not walk out there without it," Clara said, her voice shaking with a sudden, brilliant rage. She did not know what she was going to do, but she knew she could not leave that book. She lunged for the basket. One of the women grabbed her arm. "Stop it, you'll ruin the dress." "Get out!" Clara shouted. She shoved the woman, hard. The door flew open again. "Jeb Caro, what is the problem now?" He saw Clara, her face white, her eyes blazing, clutching her sewing basket. He saw the fury in her, and his eyes narrowed. "Give me that." "No." He grabbed the basket from her. He dumped it. Thread, scissors, scraps of canvas, and the green ledger tumbled onto the floor. He stooped, his eyes on the book. "Well, what is this?" Clara launched herself at him. She was not trying to fight him. She was trying to get the book. She grabbed it. He grabbed her. He was immensely strong. He yanked her arm, twisting it. "Let go!" He grabbed the front of her dress, the expensive silk, and pulled. The fabric tore. The sound was loud in the small room. Like a scream, the buttons popped, scattering across the floor. She stumbled back, away from him, clutching the book to her chest. The dress was ruined, ripped open from her neck to her waist, hanging in shreds. Caro looked at her, then at the book. He understood. He did not know what was in it, but he knew it was the reason. "You are not going anywhere," he snarled. He lunged. Clara did the only thing she could. She turned and ran, not to the front door of the shop, but to the back door, the one that led to the alley. The heavy, torn silk skirt tangled around her legs. She was going to fall. Caro was right behind her. She stopped. She did not have time to think. She acted. Her hands went to her waist. She ripped at the buttons and hooks holding the massive skirt. It fell to the floor in a pool of white. She ran. She burst out the back door into the blinding sunlight, holding the ledger. She was wearing only her thin cotton chemise, her stockings, and her wedding boots. Jeb Caro appeared in the doorway, his face purple with rage. He put 2 fingers in his mouth and let out a piercing, terrible whistle. "Stop her! Get the book! Do not let her get away!" Men appeared from the front of the street. Caro's men, stationed to watch the church. They saw her, a woman, in her undergarments, running like a deer, clutching a book. They hollered, a mix of shock, laughter, and pursuit. Clara ran past the last building. the blacksmith's shop, and into the open scrubland. The dry dirt was hot under her thin shoes. Her lungs were on fire. The town was behind her. The sounds of shouting growing. They were gaining on her. She was not a runner. She was a seamstress. She risked a look back. Caro was closest, his long legs eating up the ground. He was going to catch her. She looked forward, her eyes blurred with tears and dust. And she saw him. He was at the edge of town, by the trading post, beside a tough-looking Mustang loaded with furs, a man she had never seen before, with dark hair and startlingly light eyes. He was just watching. She thought he was one of them. She tried to swerve, to run around him. He moved with a speed that defied thought. He was not running. He was on his horse before she had taken 2 more steps. He kicked the horse, not away, but directly into her path. She cried out, stumbling back. He was leaning down, already in motion. He was not reaching for her. He was reaching for the heavy wool cloak tied behind his saddle. He unstrapped it with one pull. In a single, fluid motion, he rode past her, leaning low. He swung the massive cloak around her shoulders, covering her. His arm, hard as oak, circled her waist. He lifted her from the ground as if she weighed nothing. He pulled her onto the saddle in front of him, sitting her sideways, shielded by his body. She gasped. "No, please." She still held the ledger, pressed between them. He ignored her. He pulled the horse's head sharply, turning it away from the town and toward the high, rocky spine of the mountains. He looked down at her. Her hair was torn from its pins. Her face was streaked with dirt, and her eyes were wide with terror. "Wrong direction, darling," he said, his voice a dry, calm rumble. "Freedom's in the mountains." A shot cracked. The bullet hissed past his ear. Jeb Caro was standing, his pistol smoking, not 50 yards away. Elias hunched low, covering Clara with his own body. He kicked the Mustang. "Here!" They did not take the road. They plunged straight into a narrow, dusty arroyo, a dry riverbed choked with rocks and mesquite. They scrambled up the far side, the horse finding footing where there seemed to be none. More shouting. Another shot, this one wild. Clara looked back. The town, the church, and her ruined life were disappearing in a cloud of dust. She was shaking so violently she could barely hold on. She was wrapped in a rough wool cloak that smelled of pine and cold air. She was being carried away by a stranger. She looked up at the hard line of his jaw. "I have proof," she gasped, her voice raw. "Proof of theft, proof of bribery. If I live until dawn, I will ruin him." Elias McCrae did not look at her. His gray eyes were fixed on the treacherous path ahead, reading the land. He just nodded once. "First," he said, "we live." He pushed the horse for another hour, moving through a maze of canyons that all looked the same to Clara. He did not follow any trail a sane man would recognize. He forced the Mustang up scree slopes, along knife-edge ridges, and through thickets of juniper that clawed at them. Clara's shins, protected only by her thin stockings, were raked raw. She did not make a sound. She just held on to him, her knuckles white, the green ledger crushed between their bodies. Finally, he stopped. They were on a high, narrow ledge, screened by wind-twisted pines. Ahead of them was a dark cleft in the rock, a shadow so deep it looked like a hole in the world. "Swallow den," he said, swinging off the horse. He reached up for her. His hands were hard and sure on her waist. He set her on the ground. Her legs buckled instantly. The terror and the ride had stolen all her strength. He caught her before she fell, setting her against the rock wall. "Wait here." He led the horse into the cleft, which opened up into a shallow, wide cave, its floor covered in fine, dry dust. It was completely hidden from the air and from the valley floor 1,000 feet below. He unsaddled the Mustang, rubbed its lathered flanks with a handful of dry grass, and gave it a small drink from his canteen. His movements were patient, economical, and calm. He did not seem hurried or afraid. He just seemed busy. Clara huddled into the cloak, her body seized by a violent, rattling shake. The adrenaline was gone, leaving a deep, bone-scraping chill. Elias returned to her. He knelt, not in the cave, but on the ledge outside. He gathered a few dry twigs, arranged them in a small pit between 3 rocks, and with a flint and steel, struck a tiny, smokeless spark. He nursed it into a small, hot fire, barely bigger than his hand. He took a tin cup from his saddlebag, poured a little water into it, and set it on a rock to warm. He sat back on his heels. He looked at her. His gray eyes were not kind. They were not cruel. They were simply assessing. "You said you had proof," he stated. Clara nodded, her teeth chattering. She pulled the ledger from inside the cloak. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. Silas Crowell, the man I was supposed to—" She could not say marry. "He is stealing the land, Antelope Valley." "I know that part," Elias said. "I saw his surveyors. Why were they shooting at you?" Her voice came out in a raw, broken whisper. She told him, the party, the unlocked safe, the ledger, the wedding morning, the fake priest, Mr. Finch, the threat against her father, Jeb Caro, tearing her dress. "He wanted the book," she finished, holding it out. "This is why—" He took it from her. He looked at her, at the raw scratches on her legs, at the thin cotton chemise visible beneath the wool. He looked at the ledger. The light was dim. He fed a larger branch into the fire. In the growing light, he opened the book. He was not a fast reader, she could tell, but he was a deliberate one. His finger moved under the words. She saw his expression change. It was subtle, a tightening of the jaw, a hardening in his eyes. He turned a page. He read the entry for Surveyor Harris, $5,000. Re-Antelope Valley reroute. He read the entry for Jeb Caro, $200. Relocation incentive. He read the last entry, detain Father Michael, Silverton errand. He closed the book. He stared into the small fire for a long time. "This is not just theft," he said, his voice lower than before. "This is a map of his entire war. You did not just steal his money, you stole his plan. You stole the proof that ties him to Harris, to Caro, to the entire fraud." He looked up at her. "He will not stop. He cannot stop. This book is a death warrant, for him, or for you." Clara swallowed. "I know. I have to get it to Denver, to the U.S. Marshal. Someone must—" "Denver," he said, interrupting her. He shook his head. "Denver is on the other side of the world, and Caro is not stupid. He knows these canyons. He will have riders on every pass by noon. You would not make it 5 miles. "Then what do we do?" she cried, the despair she had been holding back finally cracking her voice. "We just wait for them to find us." "No," he said. He took the cup of hot water and handed it to her. "You drink this. Then we climb." Climb, where?" "My cabin, Hawk's Spine. It is another 3 hours from here, and it is all vertical. No horse trail, but I can see everything from there. We can watch their search parties. We let them sweep these low canyons. In 2 days, 3 maybe. They will think we slipped out. They will move their search east. When they do, I will get you to Mecco. His people can get you north, to the Durango stage line." She looked at him over the rim of the tin cup. The warm water felt like life itself. "You know Mecco Caro. Caro was threatening his people. Mecco is my friend. This," Elias tapped the ledger, "is the proof he needs. The proof I could not find. You did not just save yourself. You might have saved them. That is why I am helping you." She nodded. A practical reason. It was better than charity. It was a transaction. She understood transactions. They rested for only 1 hour, just as the sky was turning a faint, sick gray. Elias doused the fire, scattering the ashes so they looked like old soot. He saddled the horse. "We need to know what we are facing," he said. "Stay here. Do not move. Do not make a sound. Do not leave this cave for any reason. I will be back." He was gone. He did not take the horse. He just dissolved into the rocks, moving on foot down the canyon he had just climbed. Clara was alone. The silence was absolute, broken only by the horse's soft breath and the pounding of her own heart. She huddled in the cloak, her body aching, her mind replaying the image of Caro's men laughing, naked, running. She felt a wave of profound, burning shame wash over her. She was still sitting there, frozen, when Elias reappeared. It was full daylight. He had been gone for 2 hours. He did not make a sound. He was simply there. His face was grim. "It is worse than I thought," he said. He took a long drink from his canteen. "Crowell is smart, and he is fast." "What did he do?" "He has turned us into the criminals." I got close enough to the livery. "Caro is telling everyone I kidnapped you, that I rode in, grabbed you from the church steps, ripped your dress off, and rode away with you screaming." Clara gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. He said that?" "He did, and Crowell is playing the part of the grieving groom. He has posted a reward, $500. For you, the safe return of his bride. And for me, dead or alive, there is a poster with my name on it hanging in the sheriff's office." The lock clicked shut. There was no going back. There was no walking into the sheriff's office to show him the ledger. The sheriff was part of the posse. "The whole town," she whispered. "He turned the whole town against us." "He turned them into a hunting party," Elias corrected. "That $500 is for the townsfolk. Caro and his men have different orders. I saw them ride out. They are not hunting a kidnapper. They are hunting for this." He pointed to the ledger she still held. "Caro's orders are to get the book, and to make sure neither of us can ever talk about what is in it." He looked at her, his eyes pinning her. "There is no town. There is no law. There is only us. And that mountain. Can you climb?" She did not answer. She just stood up, her jaw set. She handed him the empty cup. The next 3 hours were a misery unlike anything she had ever known. He led the horse as far as he could, up a path that was little more than a goat track. Then the path vanished. "We leave him here," Elias said, tying the Mustang to a deep-rooted pine. "He will be fine. There is water in that crack. We go on foot." She was still wearing her thin, silken lace wedding boots. They were made for a church aisle, not a mountain. The soles were slick. The first time she put her foot on a sloped rock, she slipped, her ankle twisting. She cried out. Elias stopped. He looked at her, then at her feet. His face was hard. "You cannot walk like that. You walk on the dirt. You leave a track. You walk on the rock. You test your footing. You use your hands." He crouched. "Watch me." He moved up a steep slab of granite, his body low, his hands and feet finding holds she could not even see. "Now you." She tried. She fell. Her hands were scraped raw in seconds. "Again," he commanded. She tried again. This time, she made it. She was breathing in great, ragged gasps. "You are loud," he said. "You breathe like a stamp mill. Breathe through your nose. Do not talk, and do not dislodge rocks. Sound travels up." They climbed. It was not walking. It was a scramble, a brutal, vertical agony. Her lungs burned. Her legs felt like water. A dry wind began to howl up the canyon, rattling the pines. "Stop," Elias whispered, pulling her flat against a rock. "What is it?" "The wind. It is coming from below us. It will carry our sound right to them. If they are down there, we wait." They lay flat on the sun-baked rock for 10 minutes, listening. Clara heard nothing but the wind and her own blood roaring in her ears. Elias seemed to not even be breathing. His eyes scanned the vast, empty space below. Finally, the wind shifted, blowing across the canyon. "Now," he said, "move!" She learned. She was a seamstress. She knew discipline. She knew how to force her body to obey her will, to sit for 12 hours straight, stitching canvas. This was just a different kind of stitching. She stitched her feet to the rock. She stitched her lungs to silence. When they reached the ridge, the sun was high and brutal. Hawk's spine. She could see the whole world. The town was a tiny, hazy smudge to the south. The valley, Antelope Valley, was a great, green slash to the east. She could see the orange flags of the surveyors, like tiny wounds. Elias let her rest, slumped behind a boulder. The horse was gone. The town was gone. Her father was gone. Her old life was burned away. And the humiliation came back. It was not fear, it was shame. She was here, in her undergarments, covered in dirt and blood, wearing a strange man's cloak. She thought of Crowell, telling his lies, grabbed her, ripped her dress. She thought of the men laughing. She began to shake again. The dry, silent sobs she had held back in the cave came now. She wrapped her arms around her knees, buried her face in the rough wool, and wept for the life that had been stolen and the dignity that had been ripped from her. Elias did not comfort her. He did not pat her shoulder or offer kind words. He respected her grief by giving it space. He walked 50 yards away, to the edge of the cliff. He produced his spyglass and began to scan the canyons below, his back to her. She cried for a long time. The shame was a physical sickness, but as she sat there, on the hard, hot rock, something else began to rise. It was the anger from the shop, the cold, practical anger of the woman who had read the ledger. He had not just tried to buy her. He had not just threatened her father. He had made her a public spectacle. He had lied about her. He had painted her as a weak, hysterical, mindless victim. He had sicked his dogs on her while playing the part of the grieving groom. Her sobs quieted. The shaking slowed. She wiped her raw, dirty face on her sleeve. He would not win. He had guns and money and a whole town of fools, but she had the truth, tucked inside the front of her chemise. She had the ledger. When Elias finally turned, the weeping woman was gone. Clara Mayfield was on her feet, pushing the tangled hair back from her face. Her eyes were dry, and they were as hard as the granite they were standing on. "They are down there," Elias said, snapping his spyglass shut. "A party of 10, moving up the main canyon. They will not find the horse, but they are coming." "Let them," Clara said. Her voice was steady. "You just need to get me to your cabin." He looked at her, a flicker of new respect in his eyes. "It is just over this ridge." The cabin was not a cabin. It was a fortress, built of stone and timber. It was nestled into the rock so perfectly it seemed part of the mountain. It had one door and 2 small windows that were more like gun ports. He pushed the door open, and she stumbled inside. It was dark, cool, and clean. It smelled of pine, wood smoke, and dried meat. There was a hearth, a table, 1 chair, and a bunk built into the wall. He barred the heavy door. He handed her a strip of dried venison. It was salty, tough, and intensely flavorful. She ate it like a starving animal. He tossed a bundle onto the bunk. "His old trousers," he said, gesturing to a hook where his own buckskins hung. "And a shirt. They will fit better than that cloak." She did not question it. She went to the corner and, with her back to him, stripped off the ruined chemise and stockings. She pulled on the soft, worn trousers and the linen shirt. They were huge, but they were warm, and they were whole. They were armor. Night fell. The world outside the tiny windows became a void of stars. From the valley, faint and distant, came a long, lonely howl. "A wolf," another answered. Clara moved to the window. "They are just talking," Elias said. He was sitting at the table, the green ledger open. studying it under the light of a single candle. "They are not the only ones moving," he said. He blew out the candle, plunging the room into darkness. "Look, down, on the low ridge." She squinted. In the bright, cold moonlight, she saw them, a procession of shadows, moving with purpose, dozens of them. "Deer," she whispered. "The elk," he corrected. "The first of the herds, moving to the valley. They are following the path, the one their mothers and their mothers' mothers showed them. They do not know about Crowell. They do not know about his flags or his railroad paper." They stood in silence, watching the ancient, silent migration. "He thinks he owns that land," Clara said, her voice a low, furious thing. "He thinks his paper makes it his." "Men like him think paper is power," Elias said, his voice a shadow beside her. "They think a gun is the final word." "I will not let him win." Clara said, "I do not have his money or his guns, but I have that book." Elias turned from the window. He relit the candle. He put his hand on the open ledger. "We will fight him, but not his way. We will not use lies. We will not murder." Clara looked at his hand on the book, then at his face. She put her own hand down, next to his. "We will fight clean," she said. "We will fight with the truth," Elias added. "And we will use the land, this mountain. It knows how to deal with men like Crowell." The first dawn on Hawk's spine was a cold, sharp, glorious thing. Clara, wrapped in Elias's heavy wool blanket, stood at the small window. She could see for 100 miles. The world was a map of purple canyons and ridges painted gold by the rising sun. Far below, so small they looked like beetles, she saw 4 riders moving up a canyon. "They are lost," Elias said, his voice quiet behind her. He had been awake for hours, cleaning his rifle. "They are following the main wash. Caro is not with them. That is just the town posse, looking for the $500. "How do you know?" "They are loud," he said. "And they are looking for a man on a horse, not a man on foot. They will tire themselves out by noon. Caro is the threat. He will be smarter. He will think." He pushed a lighter carbine into her hands. It was shorter than his, the wood worn smooth. Clara almost dropped it. She held it awkwardly, like a yardstick. "I have never held a gun in my life. Mr. McCrae, I do not shoot." "You will learn," he said. His voice was not unkind. It was simply a statement of fact, as absolute as the stone walls of the cabin. "I cannot be in 2 places at once. If Caro finds this cabin, and I am not here, you will need to know how to use this. It is a tool, like your needle, just louder." He took her outside, behind the cabin, to a flat ledge screened by boulders. He set a tin can on a rock 50 feet away. He showed her how to load it, how to settle the stock against her shoulder. "Tight," he commanded. "If it is loose, it will kick you like a mule." He placed her finger on the trigger. "It is not a pull," he said. "It is a squeeze, like you are wringing out a cloth. You breathe out, and at the end of the breath, you squeeze. You do not jerk it. You let the gun be surprised." She did as he said. She squinted. The front sight wavered. She held her breath, then let it out slowly, and squeezed. The explosion was terrifying. It slammed into her shoulder, a brutal, jarring punch that made her cry out. The bullet kicked up dust a full yard to the left of the can. "You jerked it," he said, his voice maddeningly calm. "You were afraid of the noise. Do not be afraid of it. Make it your servant. Again." She reloaded, her hands shaking. Her shoulder throbbed. She was angry, at him, at the gun, at Caro. "This is stupid. I cannot hit." "Again," he said. She set her jaw. She raised the rifle. She remembered her needles. She remembered the focus it took to push a tiny sliver of steel through thick canvas. Again and again, in a perfect, straight line. She found that place in her mind, the place that was quiet and precise and practical. She aimed, She breathed out. She squeezed. The can jumped into the air and clattered against the rock. She lowered the rifle. Stunned. Elias nodded once, a small sign of approval that felt more valuable than a chest of gold. Good. Again. They stayed there for an hour, until her shoulder was a deep, purple bruise and the can was a piece of metal confetti. Her education did not stop there. Her fine, silk wedding boots were in shreds. The soles were peeling off. "You cannot go another step in those," he said. She sat on the floor of the cabin, defeated. "It is all I have. I cannot sew leather without an awl." Elias went outside. He came back with a dark, sticky lump of pine resin and a strip of cured deer hide. He built up the small fire and set the resin in a cup near the edge to melt. "The mountain provides its own thread," he said. He showed her how to smear the hot, bubbling pitch onto the sole and the boot, how to press them together, and how to use the tough strip of hide as a binding. It was crude, messy work. Her fine sewing fingers were soon black and sticky, but when she was done, the boot was whole. It was ugly, but it was strong. She learned to check his snare lines. She learned to identify the tracks of a rabbit versus the tracks of a fox. She learned to move over rock without sending pebbles scattering into the silence. His steady, practical attitude was a balm. He demanded everything from her, but he asked nothing of her. He did not ask her to be grateful. He did not ask her to be afraid. He did not ask her to be anything but useful, after a lifetime of being told to be quiet, to be pretty, to be an asset for men. His blunt, impersonal demands were the first true respect she had ever known. That night, as they sat by the low fire, the tension had eased. The search parties had gone back to town, defeated by the terrain. Clara was stitching a tear in the sleeve of the shirt he had given her, her movements small and precise. "You have been in the army," she said. It was not a question. He looked up from the knife he was sharpening. "I was a scout for 5 years. Why did you leave?" He was silent for a long time. The only sound was the hiss of the whetstone on steel. "I left," he said finally, his eyes on the fire, "because I found out what my work was for." He told her. He spoke of his Cheyenne mother, of the pride he felt in bridging her world and the world of the white man. He told her about a treaty, signed at Fort Laramie. He had translated the words himself. He had told the chiefs, men he had known since boyhood, that the words were good, that the great father in Washington promised them the Powder River country forever. "Forever," he said, his voice flat. "That is what the paper said." "What happened?" Clara asked, her needle still. "Gold. A year later, they found gold in the Black Hills, on the treaty land. The paper did not matter anymore. The army sent me to guide a column, to relocate the hostiles." His hand stopped moving. He stared at the blade. "They were not hostile," he whispered. "They were just there, where I had told them they would be safe. I guided the bluecoats. I led them to my mother's people. I watched them burn the lodges. I watched them push women and children onto a dry, salt-crusted patch of land 100 miles from water, all so the miners could have the river bottoms. I did that." He looked at her, his gray eyes full of a cold, ancient anger. "I put my hand to that work. I helped them steal the land, all of it legal, all of it done with new paper that canceled the old paper. I left that night. I walked away. And I came here. I came to this rock where no one builds, and no one plants, and no one lies. I swore I would never again help a white man steal a piece of this earth." Clara watched him, her heart aching. "And now Crowell." "Now Crowell," Elias agreed. "He is the same man, just a different uniform. He is using the same lies, paper with a red stamp, and he is trying to steal the last free part of this land, the land that belongs to Mecco." A shadow crossed the window. Instantly, Elias was on his feet, the knife was in his hand, and he was moving toward the door, silent as smoke. Clara's heart leapt into her throat. A low, soft whistle cut the night, the sound of a red-tailed hawk. Elias put his knife away. He went to the door and whistled back. A perfect imitation. He unbarred the door. Meko slipped inside. He was not the angry, defiant man Elias had seen by the river. He was a man consumed by a cold, desperate fury. He ignored Clara. He spoke to Elias in the rapid, guttural flow of Cheyenne. Elias listened, his face hardening into stone. When Meko finished, Elias translated, his voice tight. Crowell is not waiting. He has moved his surveyors into Antelope Valley. They have set up a camp. They are digging foundations for a supply depot. Meko spoke again, his voice raw. He says they are building on the meadow, the place where the elk herds rest. It is where his grandfathers are buried. He says Crowell's men have cut down the burial scaffolds to use the wood for their fires. Clara gasped, her hand covering her mouth. This was not just theft. It was desecration. My young men want war, Meko said, switching to the rough English Elias had taught him. He looked at Clara now, his eyes burning. They want to paint their faces. They want to take Caro's hair. I cannot hold them. If you fight, you lose, Elias said, his voice sharp. That is what Caro wants. He wants an uprising. He wants savage attackers. It is his excuse to bring in the army and wipe you out. It is the relocation incentive, the excuse to murder you. So we do nothing, Meko cried. We let them dig up our dead. Your law is a sickness. This paper law is made of lies. Then we use a different paper, Clara said. Both men turned to look at her. She had stood up. She was no longer the frightened girl from the wedding. She was a woman holding a needle, her face pale but resolved. You are right, she said to Meko. Your law is of the land. His law is of paper. But he is a vain, meticulous man, and he broke his own law. He wrote down his crimes. She went to her bunk, reached into the straw-filled mattress, and pulled out the green ledger. Elias, she said, translate for me. She opened the book. She pointed to the entry. Jeb Caro, $200. Relocation incentive for Cheyenne. Elias translated. Meko's eyes widened. She turned the page. SH, $5,000. Antelope Valley reroute authorization. Elias translated again. He paid the railroad man to fake the map, to move the iron horse over your land. Meko stared at the book, at the neat, flowing script. He could not read the letters, but he understood the names. He understood the numbers. He understood the evil. This, Elias said, tapping the book, is our weapon. Not guns, not war. This is the truth that kills his paper lie. Meko looked at Clara. He saw the strength in her. He gave her a slow, respectful nod. He left as he had come, a shadow in the night, promising to hold his warriors for 3 more days. After he was gone, Clara stood holding the ledger. It felt heavier now. It was not just her life. It was the life of a people. She remembered standing in the bank, feeling like a doll, a pretty, silent object to be bought and displayed. Her father's good girl, her husband's asset. She had run to save herself from that, from the shame. Now, she looked at the book. This was not shame. This was responsibility. Her fear, the cold, shaking terror of the good doll, finally burned away, leaving something hard and clear in its place. She was not a victim. She was the witness. Elias was watching her. Meko is right. They will come here, he said. Caro is not a fool. He will check the high country. He will find this cabin, and he will be looking for that book. We cannot let him find it, she said. Elias nodded. He picked up his axe. For the rest of the afternoon, he worked. He did not build a chest. He built a small, simple box of pine, fitting it together with wooden pegs, making it tight. Just before dusk, he took her outside. He carried the box with the ledger inside it. He did not go far. He led her to a massive, ancient pine that stood alone on the ridge. Half of it was green and alive. The other half was a silver, splintered scar, where lightning had struck it decades ago. "The split tree," he said. He climbed, agile as a squirrel, up to a hollow where a great branch had broken off. He wedged the box deep inside. He sealed the hollow with a flat rock and scraps of bark, using the same pine pitch he had used on her boots. When he was done, it was invisible. It just looked like part of the tree. He climbed down. He took his knife and a flat, cured piece of leather from his pouch. He did not write words. He scratched symbols. A wavy line for the ridge, a small square for the cabin, a jagged fork for the split tree, a triangle for the bear-shaped rock on the western slope. He handed the leather map to her. "If something happens to me," he said, his voice low, "if they find me, and I do not come back, you take this. You find Mako. He will understand these marks. He will find the book." She closed her hand around the small, stiff piece of leather. He was trusting her, not just with his life, but with his mission, with the one thing that mattered. The tension was a tight, cold wire in the cabin. They had hidden the proof. They had declared their war. That night, Elias cooked. He was a silent, efficient cook. He put dried beans, salt pork, and water into the iron pot and hung it over the fire. He sat and stared at the flames. An hour later, he declared it was ready. He ladled the stew into 2 wooden bowls. Clara, who had cooked for her father for 10 years, looked at it. The water was thin and gray. The pork was a pale, floating lump. She took a bite. The beans were hard, almost raw. The water was flavorless, except for a faint, burnt taste from the bottom of the pot. It was, without question, the worst food she had ever put in her mouth. Elias ate his with a grim, steady focus. He did not seem to notice. Clara took another bite. It was still terrible. A small, hysterical bubble of laughter rose in her chest. The situation was absurd. They were trapped on a mountain, hunted by killers, protecting a book that could save a valley, and her rescuer, this perfect, silent mountain man. He was a dreadful cook. A small smile, the first real one in days, touched her lips. "Mr. McCrae," she said. "Elias," he corrected, not looking up. "Elias," she said, her voice dry. "You can read the wind. You can walk on solid rock without a sound. You can see a man from 2 miles away." He looked up, wary. "But you cannot boil water," she finished. He stopped, his spoon halfway to his mouth. He looked at his bowl. He looked at her. "It is food," he said, his voice defensive. "It is a tragedy," Clara said, her eyes glinting. "You have offended these beans, and you have insulted the pig." He stared at her. His stone-gray eyes flickered. The hard line of his mouth softened. A low, strange sound rumbled in his chest. It was a rusty, unused sound, like a hinge that had not been opened in years. He was laughing. He looked back at his bowl and shook his head. Clara smiled back. And for a minute, they were not the kidnapper and the bride. They were not the rescuer and the victim. They were just 2 people, on top of a mountain, sharing a terrible, terrible meal. The silence that fell after was different. It was not empty. It was shared. The laughter from the night before, thin and fragile as it was, left a warmth in the cabin that lasted until morning. It was the first human sound Elias had heard in his high, cold fortress in months that was not his own, and the silence that followed it felt companionable. He found himself watching her. He watched the efficient way she moved, restarting the fire, her hands precise as she handled the kindling. He watched the way her mind worked, the way she looked at the maps he had scratched on leather, her brow furrowed, memorizing the terrain. They had been on the mountain for 3 days. The air was charged with their hidden secret, with the stolen ledger. But the immediate threat seemed to have receded. The town posse had given up the lower canyons. Caro was still a shadow, but he had not shown himself. On the 4th morning, Elias was on the ridge at dawn, his spyglass fixed on the distant, hazy line of the river. Clara was inside, grinding their meager supply of coffee beans with a rock. He went still. A faint, dark pillar was rising against the clean blue of the morning. It was not the steady, pale gray smoke of a cook fire. It was dark, oily, and thick. It was rising from the cottonwood grove by the river. Meko's camp. "He did it," Elias said, his voice a low, hard thing. He was already moving, grabbing his rifle and his pack. "What? Who?" Clara ran to the door, her face pale. "Caro. He is burning them out, just like he threatened." He did not look at her. He was checking his ammunition. "Stay here. Bar the door. Do not open it. For anyone. Not even me. Until you hear the hawk signal." "You are going alone." "I am fast alone." He was gone. He did not run. He flowed down the mountain, using the rock falls and shadows as cover, descending in an hour what had taken them 3 hours to climb. Clara barred the heavy door. The cabin, which had begun to feel like a sanctuary, instantly became a prison. She was alone with the silence, which was now filled with the image of that dark, rising smoke. Elias reached the riverbank 2 miles upstream from the camp. He moved through the willows like a ghost. He could smell it now, the acrid stench of burning hides, burning canvas, and something else. Kerosene. This was no accident. He found Meko not in the camp, but 50 yards downstream, his face a mask of cold fury. He and his men were crouched behind a berm, armed with bows and 2 old rifles. "He came before sunrise," Meko said in Cheyenne, his voice thick with hate. "Caro. And 10 men. They rode in, shooting and yelling, throwing torches. They poured coal oil on the lodges." "Anyone hurt?" Elias asked, his eyes scanning the burning camp. "We got the women and children into the river. They are hidden downstream. But my cousin's boy, Little Hawk, he is 4 years old. He was asleep. He is still in there." Elias looked. The largest lodge, Meko's own, was an inferno, but a smaller one. His cousin's was only half caught, smoke pouring from its entrance. "They are still here," Meko whispered, gesturing. "On the far bank, waiting. They want us to run out, so they can shoot us down. They want to call it a fight." Elias saw them. Caro was not with them, but 2 of his men were, along with ranchers from Crowell's Pocket. They were waiting for the uprising Caro wanted to report. "Give me your blanket," Elias said. Meko handed him the thick wool. Elias ran to the river, soaking it until it was heavy. "Draw their fire," he said. "To the south." Meko nodded. He and his men loosed a volley of arrows toward the horsemen, yelling a war cry. The men on the far bank laughed and returned fire, their bullets kicking up mud and water. In that instant, Elias ran. He sprinted across the clearing, low to the ground, the wet blanket held over his head. The smoke was a solid, choking wall. He dropped to his belly and crawled into the burning lodge. It was an oven. He could not breathe. He heard a small, terrified cough. In the back, a child was huddled under a pile of sleeping furs. Little Hawk. Elias wrapped the boy in the heavy, wet wool, cocooning him completely. "Hold your breath," he commanded. He burst back out of the lodge flap, running, zigzagging. A rifle cracked from across the river. The bullet tugged at his sleeve. He did not slow. He plunged back into the willows, handing the coughing, terrified child to Meko. The shooters, realizing they had been fooled, let out an angry yell. But it was too late. The raid was over. The damage was done. They mounted up and rode away, laughing. Elias and Meko's men ran into the smoldering camp, dousing the flames with buckets of river water. The lodges were gone. Their winter food stores were destroyed. Their homes were ashes. "We will hunt them," Meko said, his voice trembling with a rage so deep it was almost silent. "We will hunt them all. No, Elias said. He was kicking at the embers of the main fire pit, his face hard. We use the law, my law, the white man's law, the one he broke. The white man's law is this, Meko said, gesturing to the ruins. No, this is... Elias knelt. He pulled something from the ashes. It was a wooden stake, four-sided, sharpened at one end, the top painted bright orange. It was one of the surveyor's stakes, but this one had been used as a torch, the end of it still black with kerosene. He turned it over, burned into the wood. Just below the paint was a cattle brand. Not a brand, but a company mark, a circle with a stylized ACR inside. Animus Land and Rail Company. Elias said. Crowell's own mark. He did not just send Caro. He sent his own surveyors. This is the proof. This connects the fire to him. He wrapped the stake in a piece of canvas. This was the second piece of the puzzle. The ledger showed the plan. This showed the violence. Clara spent 2 days alone in the cabin. She had never known such isolation. She checked the snares, as he had taught her. She practiced with the rifle, the noise echoing in the vast emptiness. She read the leather map over and over, until she knew it better than her own hand. When Elias returned, he was a different man. The calm, patient teacher was gone. He was the cold, angry soldier. He carried the charred surveyor's stake. He told her what had happened. He told her about the child, the destroyed camp, the waiting ambush. Clara looked at the stake, at the ACR brand. He is trying to start a war. He has. Elias said. Meko's young men are painting their faces. I have 3 days. That is all. 3 days to stop them from riding into town for revenge. If they do that, Crowell wins. The army comes. It is over. Clara felt a cold, sharp focus settle over her. The fear was gone. The waiting was over. Then we cannot wait on this mountain, she said. Elias looked at her. There is nowhere to go. Caro has the town. He has the passes. He does not have everyone, Clara said. I know someone. A woman. Nora. She runs the Silver Slipper Saloon. Elias snorted. A saloon keeper. A saloon keeper who sees everything, Clara insisted. And she hates Silas Crowell. He tried to buy her saloon last year to tear it down for a hotel. She told him, well, she told him in words I would not repeat. He threatened her. She just polished her shotgun and told him to try. He backed down. She is not afraid of him. And what will she do? Caro's men live in her saloon. They do, but she also knows the mail riders, the Federal Express men. They are not local. They do not work for Crowell. They work for the government. If we can get a message to the U.S. Marshal in Denver, a real message. And how do we get that message to her? Elias demanded. You cannot walk into Animus Crossing. You are a ghost. You are the kidnapped bride. A ghost can walk anywhere. Clara said, I know that town. I know the alleys. I know the back doors. And no one will be looking for an old herb woman. She laid out her plan. It was simple. It was desperate. It was, she realized, completely practical. Elias argued. He forbade it. It was too dangerous. It was suicide. You have 3 days, she said, her voice quiet. You have 3 days to stop a war. This is the only way. You taught me to shoot. You taught me to walk on rock. Now let me use what I know. He stared at her, his internal battle clear on his face. He was a man who worked alone. He was a man who protected. The thought of sending her, alone, into the town that wanted her captured, it was tearing him apart. But he was also a practical man. He looked at the surveyor's stake. He looked at her resolved face. He knew she was right. He nodded. Once. Tonight. He made her wait until 3 in the morning, the hour when the drunks were asleep and the town was dead. He retrieved the ledger from the split tree, by candlelight. Clara, with her perfect, steady hand, copied the 3 most important pages onto fresh paper. Harris's $5,000 bribe, Caro's $200 relocation incentive, and the entry about detaining Father Michael and using the fake priest, Mr. Finch. She folded the papers and tucked them into her boot. Elias gave her an old, dark shawl and a pouch of dried yarrow and mint from his own supplies. "If anyone stops you," he said, his voice rough, "you are the herb woman from Silverton. You are gathering medicine. You do not know anyone. You do not know my name." "I know," she said. He took her down the mountain, by a different path, a dark, winding cut that ended in the deep shadows of the town's graveyard. "Nora's saloon has a back door," Clara whispered. "By the ice house. I will be back on this spot before the sun is fully up." "If you are not," Elias said, "I am coming in." "I will be here," she said. She pulled the shawl over her head, bent her back, and transformed. She was no longer Clara Mayfield. She was an old woman, shuffling, insignificant. She slipped between the headstones and was gone. The walk was the longest of her life. The town was a maze of dark alleys, smelling of stale beer and refuse. She moved from shadow to shadow. She reached the back of the Silver Slipper. The back door was unlocked, just as she knew it would be. It led to the kitchen. A single lamp was burning. Nora was there, sitting at a table, a shotgun across her lap, a cup of coffee in her hand. She was a large woman, with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen everything. She raised the shotgun as Clara slipped in. "Nora," Clara whispered, pulling back the shawl. Nora's eyes went wide. She lowered the gun. "Good God, Clara Mayfield, they said you were dead. Or worse." "They lied," Clara said. "I am here, and I need your help." "You are the most wanted woman in Colorado. Girl, getting you help is getting myself hung." "Silas Crowell is a thief and a murderer," Clara said. She took the papers from her boot and laid them on the table. Nora put on her spectacles. She read the pages, her lips moving silently. Her face, already hard, turned to granite. "That son of a bitch," she whispered. She read the line about Mr. Finch. "Finch, I knew it. I knew that man was a snake." "He burned out Mecco's camp this morning," Clara said. "He is trying to start an Indian war to cover his theft. I need to get these papers to the U.S. Marshal in Denver." Nora was silent. She looked at Clara, then at the papers. "Tom Jeffords," she said. "He is my Federal Express rider. He is smart, and he hates Crowell. He rides for Durango at 6. The 6 o'clock mail must get through. He can wire it from there." She took the papers, folded them into a small oilskin packet, and tucked it into her own bodice. "I will give it to Tom myself. He will guard it with his life." She looked at Clara. "Now, you, get out of here. Use the cellar grate. It opens onto the alley behind the land office. Go. Do not ever come here again." Clara nodded. "Thank you, Nora." "Do not thank me," Nora said, picking up her shotgun. "I am just tired of roaches. Now, go." Clara slipped out of the grate. The sky was turning a pale, bruised purple. Dawn was coming. She ran, her heart pounding, back through the alleys, toward the graveyard. She was almost there. She had to cross one open, dusty patch of ground behind the blacksmith's shop. She was halfway across when a voice stopped her. "Hold it! Right there!" A man stepped out from the shadow of a rain barrel. It was not Caro. It was one of his men, a lanky, sharp-faced man named Pete. He had been posted to watch the graveyard. His pistol was in his hand. "Well, well," he said, his eyes raking over her disguise. "What is an old woman doing out so early?" Clara's mind raced. "He taught me this. Walk backward in your own prints." Just looking for herbs, sir," she whispered, her voice a reedy quaver. "For my rheumatism." "In the graveyard," he sneered. He took a step closer. "Let me see your face." She knew, in that instant, that if he saw her face, she was dead. She stumbled backward, as if in fear. "Please, sir, I mean no harm." I said, "Stop." She stumbled backward again, purposefully, right into the deepest, softest patch of dust. "Oh, dear." "You are hiding something," he said, advancing. She looked at the ground. Her new, backward steps were pointing away from him, toward a deep, shadowy crevice in the rocks at the edge of the graveyard. She turned and ran. "Stop!" he yelled, and fired. The shot went wide. He ran after her. He hit the patch of dust and stopped, confused. He saw her first set of tracks, coming from the graveyard. He saw her second set of tracks, also coming from the graveyard. It looked like two people had met, and one had run back into the rocks. "Sam!" he yelled. "He has got a partner over here." He ran toward the crevice, following the false trail. Clara did not run to the crevice. The moment he was fooled by the tracks, she had scrambled, low and fast, behind the blacksmith's shop and bolted for the mountain. She ran until her lungs were fire. She scrambled up the dark cut, falling, tearing her hands, and half crawled onto the ledge where Elias was waiting. He was standing, his rifle in his hand, his body rigid as iron. When he saw her, his entire body seemed to deflate. He pulled her behind the rock, his hand clamped on her arm. "He shot at you," he said. His voice was terrible. "He missed," she gasped. "He missed. I did it. Elias, I got away. I used the track trick. Nora has the papers. She is giving them to the writer. They are on their way to Denver." She was triumphant. She was alive. She had won. She looked at him, and the triumph faded. He was not looking at her. He was staring at the town, his face pale, his knuckles white on his rifle. "Elias?" He turned to her. His gray eyes were not calm. They were blazing with a raw, unfamiliar emotion. Do not ever do that again," he said. "I had to," she said. "He shot at you." He reached out, his hand shaking, and his fingers brushed a strand of hair from her face. It was the first time he had touched her with anything but clinical, practical necessity. "When I heard that shot," he said, his voice a low rasp, "I realized I am used to being alone. Alone is simple. Alone is safe. I do not care about alone. But when you were down there, I was not thinking about the ledger. I was not thinking about Mecco. I was just listening for that second shot." He looked at his own hand, the one that had touched her, as if he did not recognize it. "You make things unsafe, Clara," he whispered. "You make me afraid. I am not used to being afraid." Clara's heart stopped. She saw the truth of him, the loneliness he had mistaken for freedom, the solitude he had used as a shield. She saw the man under the mountain. The air in the cabin that night was thick with unspoken words. The line between them had been crossed. He had confessed his fear, his vulnerability. He sat on his stool. She sat on her bunk. The space between them was a new kind of canyon. He made a move to stand up, to say something else. Clara held up her hand. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was clear. "Elias," she said. He stopped. "We do not," she said, her voice quiet but absolute. "We do not touch. We do not cross that line. Not now. Not while we are running. Not while I am still your responsibility." He looked at her, confused. "Clara, Respect," she said. "You have shown me more respect than any man I have ever known. You taught me to be strong, not weak. You gave me a gun, not silk. That is what this is." She pointed to the space between them. "I will not be a spoil of war. I will not be a comfort. I will not be an asset." She met his gaze. "When this is over, if we live, and if I am free, truly free, with my own name and my own life, then I will choose, and you will choose, but not before. We fight first. We get the truth out, respect, before anything else." Elias looked at her for a long, long moment. He saw the woman who had faced down his bad cooking, the woman who had learned to shoot, The woman who had walked into the enemy's camp, and the woman who was now in this small, dark cabin, claiming her own soul. He sat back down. He picked up his whetstone. "Respect," he agreed. He nodded. "You are right." He began to sharpen his knife. The sound of the steel on the stone was the only sound. The setback came 2 days later. It came in the form of Meko. He appeared at the door at sundown, and he did not wait for the signal. He hammered on the door. Elias let him in. Meko's face was a ruin. "What is it?" Elias said. "The rider." Meko said, "Tom Jeffords, the one from the saloon." "What about him?" Clara asked, her stomach turning to ice. "He never made it to the Durango line. They found his horse this morning, 10 miles south. Horse was shot. The mail bags were ripped open. The oilskin packet, it was gone." Clara sat down, her legs giving out. "No!" "Jeb Caro." Meko said, "He must have been watching the express station. He knew. He stopped the message. He has your papers. Clara, Crowell has them." It was not a setback. It was a catastrophe. They had played their only card, and it had been taken. Crowell now knew exactly what they had. He knew they had allies, and he knew they were still alive. The hunt was no longer a chase. It was an extermination. The silence in the cabin was a thick, cold thing. Meko had told them, and now the three of them, Elias, Clara, and Meko, sat with the catastrophic news. The copied pages were gone. The mail rider was dead. Crowell knew. He knew Nora was their ally. He knew they had the original book, and he knew exactly what proof they held. "He will come for us now," Elias said, his voice flat. He was checking his rifle, his movements mechanical. "He will not send a posse. He will send Caro. He will not come to capture. He will come to kill, and he will go for Nora first." "My warriors," Meko began, his voice thick with rage. "They will not wait. They will see this as a sign. We must fight." "No," Clara said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the despair. Both men turned to look at her. She was standing by the hearth, her face pale in the dim light, but her eyes were burning. "No," she repeated. "Fighting is what he wants. Meko, you said it yourself. He wants an uprising. He wants an excuse to bring the soldiers. And Elias, you said he controls the town. We tried to use his system. We tried to use the mail. He controls that, too. We have been hiding. We have been running. We have been whispering. That is why we are failing." "What else is there?" Elias asked. "We stop whispering," she said. "We stop hiding. We take the light to him. We take it to the whole town." Elias stood up. "Clara, that is suicide. We walk into town. Caro puts a bullet in us before we can say 10 words. He has the copies. He will just say we are liars. He will say we are the murderers." "He will," Clara agreed. "He will have his story, but we will have ours. And we will have something he does not. We have the truth. We have the original book. We have Meko, and we have the charred steak from his fire." "They will not listen to me," Meko said, his voice bitter. "I am a savage to them." "They will listen," Clara said. "If we do it right. We have to warn Nora. She is in danger, and she is the only one who can do it." "Do what?" "Call a town meeting. Tonight, in the Silver Slipper. She will tell them it is a meeting about the Indian threat. She will tell them Silas Crowell himself will be there to address the crisis. He will not be able to resist. He will come to play the part of the town's savior, and Caro will be there to protect him. They will all be there, in one room. And that is when we walk in." Elias stared at her. The plan was insane. It was a desperate, impossible gamble. It was walking directly into the lion's den, holding a piece of meat. "It is our only move," Clara insisted. "We have tried the shadows. Now, we use the light." Elias looked at Meko. He saw the same desperate resolve. Their time was gone. Their options were gone. He went to the split tree and retrieved the ledger. He nodded once, his face carved from stone. Tonight. They entered Animus Crossing as they had left it, through the graveyard. It was 10 o'clock at night. The saloon was louder than usual, a nervous, angry sound. Elias had scouted the building. Caro had 2 men watching the back alley, but he had not been watching the cellar grate. The 4 of them, Elias, Clara, Meko, and now Nora, stood in the damp, dark cellar, the smell of sour beer and potatoes thick around them. Nora's face was ashen. "They have been here," she whispered, her hands shaking as she lit a small lantern. 2 of Caro's men, they came in this afternoon, just for a friendly drink. They tore my office apart. They did not find anything, but they were not looking for anything. They were giving me a message. Tom Jeffords is dead. They called it a robbery. "We know. Nora," Clara said. "That is why we are here. You have to call the meeting. Now." "Girl, they are right upstairs," Nora hissed. "Caro is at the bar. He has been drinking for an hour." "Good," Elias said, his voice a cold whisper. "A drunk man is a sloppy man. Call the meeting. Get them all in the main room. We will come from the kitchen." Nora looked at the 3 of them. The hunted scout, the Cheyenne chief, his face a mask of war, and the seamstress, who now looked more like a soldier than either of them. She took a deep breath, blew out the lantern, and went upstairs. 10 minutes later, they heard her voice, booming over the saloon's noise. "All right, settle down, all of you. You have all been whispering, scared out of your wits. You want answers about Meko's fire. You want to know what is being done to protect this town? Well, Mr. Silas Crowell is here, and he is going to address this problem right now." A ragged cheer went up, mixed with angry shouts. They heard the scrape of benches as men moved to the main room. "Get up on the bar, Mr. Crowell," Nora yelled, "so they can see you." This was it. Elias looked at Clara. "Stay behind me, no matter what." Clara shook her head. "I stay beside you." She clutched the green ledger to her chest. They moved up the cellar stairs and into the dark, hot kitchen. They stood by the swinging doors, listening. Crowell's voice was smooth, rich with false sorrow and command. "My friends, my good neighbors, this is a dark hour, as you know. My poor, confused fiancée. Clara was abducted by the known half-breed, Elias McCrae." He paused, letting the shock settle. "I have difficult news. It seems she did not survive the ordeal, but before she died, she was forced by McCrae and his savage ally, Meko, to help them write these." They heard the rattle of papers, the copies. "Forgeries," Crowell boomed. "Vile lies, designed to extort money from me to undermine our town, and when their blackmail failed. What did they do, Meko and his braves, in a fit of rage? Burned their own camp to make it look like they were victims. They murdered the Federal Express rider, Tom Jeffords, to steal the mail. And I have proof they are planning to raid this town, perhaps tonight." The room exploded. Men were shouting, "Hang them! Get a posse!" "He is a liar." The voice was not a shout. It was a clear, cold bell. The saloon door swung open. Elias and Clara stepped out. Meko was right behind them, his arms crossed, his face a judgment. The room went dead silent. Men fumbled for pistols. Jeb Caro, standing near the bar, froze, his whiskey glass halfway to his mouth. Silas Crowell's face turned the color of wet cement. "Ghosts," a miner whispered. "We are not ghosts," Clara said, stepping forward. Elias's hand was on his rifle, but he did not raise it. "He is the liar," Clara said, her voice ringing in the sudden, terrible silence. She held up the green ledger. "He holds the copies. I hold the truth. He told you I was dead. He is afraid of me. He told you Meko burned his own camp." She threw the charred surveyor's stake onto the floor. It skidded and stopped at Crowell's feet. "Then why?" she demanded. Was his company branded stake? soaked in kerosene, found in the ashes. Ask him. Meko stepped forward. He burned our homes. He burned the scaffolds of our grandfathers. We did not fire a single shot. It is a trick, Crowell stammered, his composure cracking. They are in it together. Then ask him, Clara said, her voice dropping. She pointed, her fingers shaking, at Mr. Finch, the notary, who was trying to hide behind a stove. Ask Mr. Finch. Tell them, Mr. Finch, who did Silas Crowell pay to stand in the church? Who was supposed to be my priest? All eyes turned to Finch. The small man was vibrating with terror. He looked at Crowell, who was glaring at him. He looked at Jeb Caro, whose hand was now resting on his gun. He looked at the 50 angry, confused miners. I did not, Finch stammered. Mr. Crowell, he just said it was a land certification, a formality. He paid me $100. He said Father Michael was detained. It was enough. A low, angry growl rose from the crowd. They had been lied to. She is a witch, Crowell screamed, his voice breaking into a desperate shriek. She is a fallen woman. Look at her dressed in rags, running with a savage. She has no honor. She has no shame. She is disgraced. He had played his last card. He was trying to ruin her, to shame her into silence. Clara stood very still. She looked at the faces staring at her. The miners, the blacksmith, the women Nora employed, all the people who had seen her as the quiet, invisible seamstress. Disgraced, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the room. You want to speak of disgrace? Silas? She walked into the center of the floor, right under the hanging kerosene lamp. She was no longer afraid. She was incandescent with rage. I will tell you what happened on my wedding day, she said. I found his book. I found his plan to steal Antelope Valley. I found his plot to use a fake priest to legalize his theft. And when I refused, he sent him. She pointed at Jeb Caro. He came to my room. He threatened to murder my father. He tore my wedding dress from my body. The silence was absolute. Not a man breathed. I ran, Clara said, her voice clear and strong. I ran from him. I ran out the back door and into the street. Yes, I was in my undergarments, nearly naked, for every man in this town to see. She looked straight at Crowell. Her face was not shamed. It was a judgment. I was not disgraced. I was hunted. I was running from the thief who sits on that bar. I was running from the man who burns camps and murders mail riders. His men were chasing me, laughing, shooting at me, while he prepared to play the part of the sad, abandoned groom. She turned, and her gaze found Elias, who was watching her, his face taut with a fierce, burning pride. And this man, she said, her voice shaking but full of strength. This abductor, he rode up. He did not hurt me. He did not lay a hand on me. He covered me with his own cloak. He saved my life. She gave a short, sharp, bitter laugh. He saw me running back toward this town, toward this corruption, and he said, Wrong direction, darling. Freedom's in the mountains. The tide did not just turn, it broke. The miners looked at Clara, and they did not see a fallen woman. They saw a woman who had been wronged. They saw courage. They looked at Crowell, and they saw a thief. Jeb Caro was not a man for debate. He saw his power, his control, his entire world evaporating. He saw his boss exposed. He let out a roar. Shut her up. He pulled his pistol and aimed it straight at Clara's heart. A shot exploded in the saloon. It was not Caro's. It was Elias. He had not moved. His rifle was still at his hip, but smoke was curling from the barrel. Jeb Caro screamed. It was a high, thin sound. His pistol, not his body, flew from his hand, spinning through the air. The gun clattered to the floor. Its wooden grip shattered. Caro stared at his hand. Blood was pouring from 2 fingers. His gun hand was ruined. Elias had not killed him. He had disarmed him. He had kept his promise. "Now," Elias roared. He grabbed Clara's arm. Nora brought her shotgun up, aiming it not at a man, but at the massive mirror behind the bar. She fired. Glass, whiskey bottles, and shelves exploded, showering Crowell and his men. Meko charged the kitchen doors, throwing his shoulder against them, crashing into the men Caro had posted outside. In the chaos, Nora, Elias, and Clara plunged into the dark alley behind the saloon. "This way!" Nora yelled, pulling them toward a narrow, high alley that led to the graveyard. Shots rang out behind them. Men were pouring out of the saloon, shouting, but they were confused. The four of them did not stop running. They ran up the mountain, back to the dark, silent safety of the rocks. They scrambled into a high, narrow cleft, the same one Elias had used on the first night. They collapsed, gasping for air. They were alive. Nora was with them now. She could never go back. "We did it," Clara panted, clutching the ledger. "We did not," Elias said. He was reloading his rifle. "We wounded them. We made Caro weak. We made the town think. But Crowell still has his men. He still has the bank. He still holds the town. And now, he is a cornered rat. He will be more dangerous than ever." "We cannot go back," Nora said, her voice grim. "He will lock the town down. He will hunt us, and he will not stop." "The town is lost," Meko agreed. "And the telegraph. Caro will be watching it." Clara looked at the ledger in her hands. The book was their only weapon, and they had nowhere to use it. Elias was staring north, past the town, toward the high, jagged peaks that were now black against a sickly, bruised sky. The wind was picking up, a low, mournful howl. "The town telegraph is lost," Elias said, "but it is not the only one." Nora looked where he was looking. "Sandstorm Pass, Jedediah Smith." "Jedediah Smith?" Clara asked. "The postmaster at the High Country Station," Elias explained. "He is not a town man. He is a federal man, an old army major. He answers to Washington, and he runs the military telegraph line. He is the only law in these mountains Crowell cannot buy." "It is a 2-day ride," Nora said, her voice heavy with doubt. "And the weather, Elias, look!" The air was electric. A low, dry rumble of thunder echoed from the west. The wind was hot, stinging their faces with sand. "It is a storm," Meko said, tasting the air. "A dry one, wind and grit. That is why we go." Elias said, "Crowell will think we ran for Durango. He will look south. He will never expect us to ride north, straight into the teeth of it." "He will be hunting us," Clara said. "Let him," Elias said. He stood up. He looked at the three of them. The saloon keeper, the chief, the seamstress. He offered his hand to Clara to pull her up the last rock. She took it. His grip was hard, dry, and warm. Her hand, calloused from the rifle and the rocks, closed around his. It was not a touch of comfort. It was a pact. It was the grip of two soldiers, agreeing to the final, desperate charge. The dry thunder cracked again, closer this time. The wind tore at her hair. They did not let go. They stood on the ridge, hand in hand, looking north as the sky prepared for war. The journey to the high pass began not with a ride, but with a climb. Elias led them back up to his horse, the Mustang waiting patiently by the hidden spring. From there, Meko took the lead, guiding them along ridges that were invisible from below. He moved with a swift, silent purpose, and in a hidden draw filled with aspens, they found 4 more horses, tethered and waiting. Meko's foresight. They mounted. Clara, Elias, Nora, and Meko. A hunted, ragged army of 4. Elias rode in the lead. Clara beside him. She had the green ledger, now wrapped in an oilskin packet, secured in a deep pocket of the trousers he had given her. Nora rode behind them, her face grim, her shotgun resting across her saddle. Meko scouted their rear, his eyes constantly moving, reading their back trail. They rode north into the high, broken country. The wind was a physical force, hot and smelling of ozone. The sky was a low, bruised, yellowish gray. There was no sun, just a diffused, angry light. The dry thunder rumbled, a constant low growl that seemed to come from the stones themselves. "He will come," Nora yelled over the wind. "Crowell will not let us go. He will expect us to run south." Elias shouted back. "To Durango. He will send Caro south. This wind, it is covering our tracks. By the time he realizes we have gone north, we will be at the pass." They rode for hours, the terrain getting rougher. The horses scrambled up rock faces and slid down shale slopes. They were moving into the high pine forest that formed the base of the pass. The smell changed. It was no longer the clean, metallic scent of ozone and dust. It was sharp, resinous, and hot. It was wood smoke. Elias reined in his horse, holding up a hand. They stopped, the horses tossing their heads, their nostrils wide and frightened. "Fire," Meko said, joining them. Elias pulled his spyglass. He dismounted, climbing a high boulder to get a clear view of the pass ahead. He was still for a full minute. When he climbed down, his face was a mask. "It is not the pass," he said. "It is the whole valley leading to it. It is on fire." "Lightning?" Clara asked, her stomach tightening. "No," Elias pointed. "The smoke is thickest there, on the east slope. That is where Crowell's surveyors were camped, the ones who burned Meko's lodge." "They got careless," Meko said, his voice flat with a fatalistic anger. "They left their fire. The wind did the rest." They rode to the edge of the ridge. The sight below them was an apocalypse. A vast 10-mile bowl of pine forest was a roaring sea of orange flame. The path to the pass, the only path, was directly through the center of it. "We cannot go around," Nora said, her voice shaking. "It would take us 3 days to circle that ridge." "We do not have 3 days," Elias said. "Caro will be on us by morning." "We go back." Nora said. "We do not go back." Clara said. Elias looked at her, then at the fire. His eyes were narrow, reading the wind, reading the flame. "The wind is blowing west," he said, pointing. "The fire is moving fast that way. But the eastern edge, along the creek bed, it is burning slower. It is mostly smoke. The water in the creek is keeping the ground damp." "You want us to ride through that?" Nora cried, horrified. "It is a game trail," Elias said. "The animals use it. It is our only chance." He turned to Meko. "You and I, we go first. We can clear a path, create a break if we need to. We will take the axes." Meko nodded, his face grim. He unstrapped the small axe from his saddle. Elias turned to Clara. His voice was sharp. "A commander's. You will lead the horses. Nora, you watch our backs. Keep the horses moving. Do not stop. Do not panic. If the horses panic, you will all die. Do you understand me?" Clara nodded, her hands tight on the reins. "If we are separated," Elias continued, his eyes boring into hers. "You do not wait. You keep moving north. You follow the creek bed until it ends. Then you climb. The post is on the high ridge. Jedediah Smith. You give him the book." "We will not be separated," she said. He and Meko rode down into the smoke. Clara took a deep breath. She pulled her shawl from her saddlebag, soaked it with water from her canteen, and tied it around her face, covering her nose and mouth. "Nora, do the same," she ordered. She took the reins of Elias's Mustang and Nora's horse. "Hold on to your saddle," she yelled. "We are going." She kicked her horse, and the small train plunged down the slope, into the stinging yellow-gray smoke. It was like riding into hell. The air was hot, choking, and so thick she could barely see her horse's ears. Ash, thick as black snow, rained down, stinging her eyes. The roar of the fire was a constant, deafening presence, like 1,000 freight trains. She found the creek bed. Elias was right. The air was slightly cooler here, the ground wet. The trees above them were burning, but the fire had not yet reached the damp ground. She kept the horses at a steady walk, her voice a constant, low murmur. "Easy, now. Good boy, keep moving. Just keep moving." The horses were terrified, their eyes rolling, but they obeyed her calm, steady hand. They rounded a sharp bend in the ravine. A dark shape was huddled by the water. Clara pulled her horses to a stop. It was a small group of people, an old Cheyenne man, 2 women, and a child. They were not from Mecco's band. They were a family, caught in the fire, their faces streaked with soot and terror. One of the women, who looked ancient, her face a map of wrinkles, saw them. She staggered to her feet, pointing back into the thickest smoke. "My grandson," she gasped in broken English. "He ran. The noise. He was scared. He ran. Back. Into the smoke." Nora grabbed Clara's arm. Her face was pale. "Clara, we cannot," Elias said. He said, "Do not stop for anything." Clara looked at the old woman's desperate face. She looked at the wall of smoke where the child had vanished. She thought of Elias, running into the burning lodge for Little Hawk. "Take the horses," Clara said, thrusting the reins of the other 3 animals at Nora. "Clara, no, you cannot. It is suicide." "Get them to the end of the ravine," Clara shouted, her voice muffled by the shawl. "I will be right behind you. Go now." Before Nora could argue, Clara kicked her horse, turning him back into the inferno. She was instantly blind. The smoke was a solid, suffocating wall. She could not breathe. "Boy!" she screamed, her voice a raw, torn sound. "Little one, where are you?" She heard it, a high, thin cough, almost lost in the roar. She leaped from the horse, slapping its rump. "Go run!" The horse bolted, back toward Nora. Clara ran on foot. "I am here, call to me." Another cough. She found him, a boy, maybe 5 years old, wedged in a hollow log, his eyes wide and vacant with terror. "Come," she said, pulling at his arm. "We have to go." He would not move. He was paralyzed. She did not have time. She grabbed him, pulling him up into her arms. He was small, but he was a dead weight. She tried to run, but she was disoriented. The smoke was yellow. The air was searing. Which way was the creek? A sudden, violent gust of wind swept down the canyon. The trees above her exploded. A wall of fire, a solid, living thing, raced toward them. She was trapped. There was nowhere to run. She did not hesitate. She threw herself on top of the boy, pressing him into the mud of the creek bed, her own body covering his. She squeezed her eyes shut, buried her face in the wet dirt, and waited for the heat. A hand grabbed her. Hard. It was not fire. It was a man. She was hauled to her feet. It was Elias. His face was black, unrecognizable, except for his eyes, which were blazing with a terrifying, furious light. He did not speak. He ripped the boy from her arms and thrust him at her. "Hold him!" He grabbed her, pulling her onto his back. "Hold on!" he roared. He scooped the child up, holding him against his chest with one arm. He ran. He did not run toward the creek. He ran straight up the side of the ravine, a sheer, rocky slope. "The fire jumped the creek!" he gasped, his lungs straining. "It is a trap!" He climbed, using his free hand, finding holds. Clara clung to his back, her arms locked around his neck, her body shielding the child she held. A massive, burning pine tree, its roots eaten away, crashed down behind them. It landed exactly where they had been, sending a volcano of embers, sparks, and superheated air rising up. Elias spun, his back to the blast. Clara felt the wave of heat. She felt him grunt, a deep, agonized sound, as the thousands of burning embers struck him. But he did not slow. He did not falter. He used his own body as a shield. He kept climbing. He reached the top, a high, narrow, wind-blasted ridge. The air was clear. They were above the smoke. Nora, Meko, and the Cheyenne family were there. Meko had found a goat path and led them up. Elias stumbled onto the ridge, setting Clara on her feet. He gave the boy to his grandmother, who collapsed, weeping, clutching the child. Elias leaned against a tall spire of rock, his chest heaving. Clara ran to him. "You are hurt," she said, seeing the back of his shirt. It was full of smoking holes. "I am fine," he gasped, his eyes on their back trail. "Well, well, ain't this a touching family reunion?" The voice was lazy, cold, and triumphant. Jeb Caro stood 20 yards away, blocking the only path down from the ridge. He was alone. His right hand was heavily bandaged, a crude, bloody mess. But his left hand was steady, and it held a Colt revolver. The revolver was aimed directly at Elias. "I knew you were smart, McCrae," Caro sneered, walking slowly toward them. "I knew you would not take the easy way south. I found your fire break. Then I just followed the smoke." Elias pushed Clara behind him. The move was slow. He was exhausted. Caro said, his lips pulling back from his yellow teeth. He shifted his aim, centering the pistol on Clara's chest. "Stop right there. You half-breed. I promised I would kill, but her I will just wound. The boss wants his book. He was very specific. Give me the book, and I will let you and the saloon whore walk away. The girl and the savages stay here. The fire will take care of the rest." Elias was trapped. His rifle was still strapped to his back. He could not reach it in time. Meko was too far away. "The book, McCrae," Caro hissed. "Or she dies right now." Clara stepped out from behind Elias. Her face was black with soot. Her hair was singed. Her clothes were torn, but her eyes were clear, steady, and blazing with a cold, pure anger. "He does not have it," she said. Caro's eyes flickered to her. "What?" "I have it," she said. She reached into the pouch at her waist. She pulled out the oilskin-wrapped packet. She held the green ledger. "Throw it," Caro commanded, his eyes fixed on the book. "No," Clara said. "It is what you want. You come and get it." You little..." Caro was shaking with rage. He took a step closer, the gun unwavering. "Throw it, or I swear I will put a bullet in your heart." "What is wrong?" "Jeb," Clara taunted, her voice low. "Afraid. Afraid of an unarmed woman. You were brave enough when you tore my dress off. Are you brave enough to take this from me?" He let out a strangled roar. He lunged, closing the distance. "I will kill you." "Here," Clara screamed, as if in a panic. "Take it, take it." She fumbled with the book. She drew her arm back, and she threw it. But she did not throw the book. In that split second, her nimble, practical fingers had done what they did best. She had pulled the hard, leather-bound cover free from the stitched pages. She threw the empty green cover. It sailed through the air, over Caro's head, toward the cliff edge. It was a perfect, desperate, brilliant bluff. Caro's eyes, his gun hand, his entire being, followed the object of his obsession. He spun, lunging to grab the spinning cover before it went over the edge. His back was to Elias. In that half-second, Elias moved. He did not reach for his rifle. He drew the long, heavy hunting knife from the sheath on his belt. He threw it, underhanded, a silent, deadly, spinning blade. The knife struck Caro in the back of his left shoulder, burying itself to the hilt. Caro screamed. It was a high, thin sound of pure agony. His pistol fired, the shot going wild, zinging off the rocks. He dropped the gun. He clawed at the knife in his back, his eyes wide with shock. A sound, louder than the fire, louder than Caro's scream, split the sky. It was not a rifle. It was a single, deafening crack of thunder, directly overhead. And the sky opened. It was not the dry storm. It was a deluge, a cold, solid wall of water, the kind of rain that turns mountains to mudslides. It hit the fire, and the world below them exploded in a billion hissing plumes of steam. The roar of the flames was extinguished, replaced by the roar of the rain. Caro was on his knees, clutching the empty ledger cover, staring at Clara. Clara stood, her hand clutching the true pages, the real ledger, holding them safe inside her wet, torn shirt. Mecco was on Caro, kicking the pistol away, pulling Caro's face into the mud. Elias staggered, pulling his knife from the man's shoulder. "Elias, no!" Clara screamed. "We do not kill, we do not—" Elias stood over Caro, his boot on the man's neck, his face a mask of primal fury. He was shaking, caught between his promise and his rage. The rain poured down, washing the soot from his face, revealing a deathly pale-skinned man beneath. "Tie him," Mecco said, throwing a rope to Nora. They bound Caro's hands and feet, pulling him away from the cliff edge. He was beaten. Elias stumbled back. He slid down the rock wall, landing heavily in the mud. Clara ran to him. He looked up at her, his eyes unfocused. He tried to smile. "Just a burn," he whispered. She looked at his side. The burning embers had not just singed his shirt, they had eaten through it. Under his arm, along his ribs, was a deep, weeping, angry red burn, the size of her two hands. The cold rain was sizzling on it. He had run, he had climbed, he had fought, with that fire eating into his side. "We have to get him to the post," Nora said, her voice grim. "He is hurt bad." Clara knelt in the mud, the rain plastering her hair to her face. She still held the ledger. They were alive. They had their prisoner. They had the truth. "Help me get him up," Clara said. The mountain had judged. The fire was out. But Elias was fading. They reached the high pass station just as the last of the gray, watery light failed. It was not a post office. It was a small, stone fortress, perched on the highest, bleakest point of the pass. A single smoky yellow light burned in its one window. Elias was a dead weight in the saddle. He had not spoken for the last hour, and Clara had been forced to hold him upright. The cold, driving rain had turned to sleet, and his wound, she knew, was dangerously infected. Mecco hammered on the heavy oak door. "Major Smith, Federal Post, open up." A slot in the door slid open, revealing a pair of suspicious, steel-blue eyes and the double barrel of a shotgun. "We are closed. Go away." "We have a federal matter. Major," Nora yelled, pushing forward. "We have evidence of murder and conspiracy, and a man is dying." The eyes lingered on Nora, then on Clara. They saw the desperation, the soot, the blood. They saw the bound, gagged, and half-drowned form of Jeb Caro, slung over his own horse. The bolt scraped back. The door opened. A man who looked carved from the same granite as the post office stood there. He was old, with a massive white beard, but his back was straight as a rifle barrel. This was Jedediah Smith. "Get him inside," Smith commanded, his voice like gravel. They carried Elias in. The room was small, hot, and smelled of bacon, wet wool, and telegraph oil. Elias was unconscious before they got him to the floor. "Major," Clara said, her voice shaking. "This man is Silas Crowell, the banker. He is trying to steal Antelope Valley. He has murdered. "Easy, girl," Smith said. He knelt, cutting Elias's shirt away. He grunted when he saw the burn. It was a vast, weeping, suppurating wound, puckered and gray at the edges. "He is septic. Get that kettle. Get all the bandages you have." For the next hour, there was no talk of ledgers or law. There was only the fight for Elias's life. Smith was a field medic, his hands rough but surprisingly gentle. He cleaned the wound with boiled water and whiskey, a process that made Elias arch in his unconsciousness. Clara, Her practical seamstress hand steady, stitched the worst of the gashes on his back, her needle dipping into flesh instead of canvas. "He is strong," Smith said, binding his ribs with clean linen. "But he has a high fever. He will be out of his head for a day, maybe more." They put Elias on the major's own cot in the back room. They brought Caro inside, tying him to the iron legs of the stove. He was silent, his eyes burning with a fever of his own. Hatred. In the main room, by the light of the lamp, Clara finally pulled the soaked, warped pages of the ledger from her shirt. She laid them on the table. "This is the proof," she said. Smith, Nora, and Mako gathered around. Clara, her voice low and exhausted, told him everything. The fake priest, the surveyors, the burned camp, the murdered mail rider. Smith listened, his face grim, his fingers drumming on his telegraph key. When she finished, he picked up the pages. "I have known Silas Crowell for 10 years, Smith said. "I always knew he was a snake. I just did not know he was a viper." "Then you will send the message?" Clara asked, hope warring with exhaustion. "You will wire the marshal in Denver." "At first light," Smith said. "The storm has the lines down. I have to repair a break on the North Ridge come morning." A cold dread settled on Clara. "Morning we do not have until morning." "No one is traveling in this girl," Smith said, gesturing to the wind that howled outside, rattling the shutters. "Not even Crowell." "You do not know him," Nora said, checking the action on her shotgun. "He is a cornered rat. He will come. He knows where we went. He knows this is the only telegraph line he does not own. Then he will find us ready." Meko said. He was standing at the window, peering into the black, sleet-filled night. "This station is solid stone," Smith said. "One door, 3 windows with iron shutters. We are safe enough." "They will be desperate," Meko said, "and they will be many." He looked at Nora. "We should prepare." Nora nodded. She began to check the heavy crossbar on the door. From her pack, she took a spool of thin, strong wire. "Give me some of those tin cans, Major." She began to work, stretching the wire across the low porch outside the door, tying it to empty cans that would rattle. Meko, meanwhile, slipped out the back window like a shadow. "Where is he going?" Clara asked. "The roof," Smith said, loading his own rifle. "It is flat. Good position. The boy knows his business." The night dragged on. Clara sat by Elias's cot. He was breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. His skin was on fire. She bathed his face with a cool, wet cloth. He did not stir. She thought of his confession on the mountain. "You make me afraid." She thought of her own words. Respect, before anything else. She had set the boundary. Now, seeing him broken and helpless, a victim of his own courage, that boundary felt like a different kind of wound. Just before 3 in the morning, a sound cut through the howl of the storm. A high, rattling, metallic crash. Nora's tripwire. "They are here," Smith said, his voice calm. He moved to the window, sliding the heavy iron shutter open just a crack. A volley of gunfire erupted. Bullets sparked off the stone walls and hammered against the oak door. It was not a few men, it was a dozen. "He brought his whole army," Nora hissed, taking the other window. The air in the small room became thick, tight, and suffocating. It smelled of gunpowder and fear. Clara could hear them shouting outside, their voices faint under the storm. "They are trying to break the door," Smith yelled. A heavy log was being used as a ram. The door groaned. "Meko!" Nora shouted. A shot rang out from above, a high-powered rifle. It was followed by a scream. Meko was on the roof, firing down. The ramming stopped. The men scattered, firing up at the roof. The room was filled with the sound of splintering wood as bullets tore through the shutters. Clara heard a man grunt. "Smith, are you hit?" Nora yelled. "Just a splinter," the major growled. Not enough lead in that one. The fight was a chaotic, terrifying thing. It was not a battle. It was a brawl. Short bursts of fire, followed by silence. The slam of bullets into rock. The heavy, ragged breathing of the people in the room. There were too few of them. Elias was unconscious. There were only 3 guns. Then, a lull. The shooting stopped. The wind was the only sound. "They are thinking," Smith whispered, planning the next push. Clara ran to the back room. Elias was awake. He was sitting up on the cot, his rifle in his hands. His face was a mask of waxy, feverish sweat. His eyes were too bright. "Elias, no," she whispered, rushing to him. "You are too weak. You are burning up." "I can hold a rifle," he gasped. His whole body was shaking, but his hands were steady on the gun. "You will die," she said, her hands on his shoulders, trying to push him back down. "We all die, if that door breaks," he said. He pushed her hands away, gently. He was going to fight. He was going to stand, to go out there and die for her, for the truth. All the boundaries, all the rules, all the practicality that had defined her. It all burned away. She saw him, not as a rescuer, not as a partner, but as the man he was, the man who had shielded her with his body, the man who respected her, the man who had been afraid to lose her. She looked at him, at his fever-bright eyes, at his stubborn, dying loyalty. She made her choice. She stepped in front of him, blocking his way. "Then wait," she said, her voice thick. "Clara, I have to—" She put her hands on his face. His skin was fire. "I am choosing this. Elias," she whispered, "I am choosing you. So you have to live. Do you understand me? You have to live." Before he could answer, she leaned in and kissed him. It was not a kiss of passion. It was not a kiss of fear. It was a kiss of fact. It was as real as the stone walls and the gunpowder in the air. It was salt and sweat and fever. And it was a promise. It was her soul, laying claim to his. It was the choice she had earned, the choice she had demanded. He was stunned. His hands, shaking, came up to grip her arms. He kissed her back, a brief, desperate, solid pressure that said everything he could not. The front door exploded. It did not just open. It was blown from its hinges, a deafening blast of shotgun fire from outside, followed by the crash of the ram. "They are in!" Nora screamed. Elias pushed past Clara, shoving her behind him. He stumbled into the main room, raising his rifle. Chaos. The room was full of smoke, sleet, and dark figures. A man burst through the smoke. It was Jeb Caro, but he was not tied to the stove. He was free. He must have broken his bonds in the first blast. He was not going for Elias, he was going for Clara. He grabbed her, yanking her out from behind Elias, pulling her in front of him as a shield. His left hand, his good hand, held a pistol. He pressed it to her temple. "Drop them!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Drop them all or I kill her right now!" Smith and Nora froze, their guns raised. Elias stood, swaying, his rifle aimed, but his target was shielded by the woman he loved. The smoke in the doorway cleared. Silas Crowell stepped inside. He was dressed in a fine, oilskin coat. He looked calm. He looked triumphant. "A magnificent effort, Miss Mayfield," Crowell said, brushing sleet from his shoulder. "All for nothing. Jeb, put the gun down, but do not let her go." Jeb Caro, his face a mask of hate, lowered the gun from her temple but kept his arm locked around her throat. "The book," Crowell said, holding out his hand. "Give me the pages, Miss Mayfield, and I will let your friends live. A simple trade." "And us," Clara choked out. Crowell smiled, that same dry, thin smile from the bank. "Why, you and I will be married. Of course, we will find Father Michael. And you will tell everyone how you were confused, how you were frightened, and how I I rescued you."
"Liar!"
Elias spat. He was still standing, though it cost him everything. "The book, Elias," Crowell said, "or I will have Jeb break her arm, then her neck. You have 30 seconds. You do not just need the book."
"Crowell!"
Elias gasped, his voice thin. He was playing for time. He was thinking. "What?" "You need to silence all of us," Elias said. He reached into the pack on the floor beside him. He pulled out the charred surveyor's stake. "This ties you to the fire. Major Smith has seen it." "And I kept a log." "Silas," Nora said, her voice shaking with rage but steady. "A diary. Every drink you bought for Caro. Every secret meeting with Surveyor Harris. It is all written down. The Major has seen that too. And I am a living witness." Meko's voice came from the darkness above. He had dropped in from the roof hatch. He stood in the shadows, his knife in his hand. "A living witness to your threats and your arson." Crowell's composure finally, completely shattered. The plan was ruined. There were too many witnesses, too much proof. "It does not matter," he screamed, his face turning purple. "It does not matter. I will kill you all. I will burn this place to the ground. Jeb, kill her. Kill her now." He had given the wrong order. He had distracted his own man. As Crowell screamed, Clara acted. She was a seamstress. She knew leverage. She knew how to use small, precise movements to break strong things. She stomped her boot heel, hard, down onto Jeb Caro's instep. He grunted, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. It was all she needed. She drove her elbow, with all her strength, backward, not into his chest, but into his right arm, into the wounded, bandaged, ruined shoulder that Elias had knifed. Jeb Caro did not scream. He shrieked. It was a sound of pure, unholy agony. His left-handed grip on the pistol spasmed. Clara did not try to run. She grabbed his gun hand with both of hers, twisting it, fighting him for the weapon. A single shot exploded. It was Elias. He had not aimed at Caro. He had aimed at the gun in Caro's hand. The pistol, struck by the rifle bullet, exploded in a spray of metal and black powder. Jeb Caro howled, clutching a left hand that was now as mangled as his right. He was disarmed. Meko was on him, a silent, flying shadow. He tackled the screaming, ruined man, binding his hands. Silas Crowell stood frozen, his mouth open, his plan destroyed. "Do not move, Silas," Major Jedediah Smith said. He had not moved. His shotgun was now aimed directly at Crowell's chest. "It is over," Elias whispered. He slid down the wall, his rifle clattering to the floor. He was done. Clara ran to him, falling to her knees, holding his head in her lap. "You lived," she whispered, her tears washing the soot from his face. "You lived." Major Smith looked at Crowell, then at Caro, then at the scattered proof. He turned his back on all of them. He walked to his table. He sat down. The room was silent, save for the moan of the wind and Caro's weeping. A new sound filled the room, a sharp, rhythmic tapping. Click, clack, click, 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 clack. Jedediah Smith was sending the message. "Major Jedediah Smith, Federal Post, Sandstorm Pass, to United States Marshal, Denver," he said, his voice a low monotone as his fingers flew. "Have in my custody verifiable proof of conspiracy, federal land fraud, arson, and multiple murders. Instigator Silas Crowell of Animus Crossing. Am holding key witnesses, including Nora O'Malley and Clara Mayfield. Am also holding prisoner Jeb Caro. Send federal marshals to Animus Crossing immediately. This is an urgent federal matter. Acknowledge." He stopped tapping. The fight was over. The truth was on the wire. Dawn broke clear, cold, and brutal. The storm had scoured the sky, leaving it a thin, pale blue. The pass was covered in a slick, icy slush. Inside the post office, the air was thick with the smell of stale gunpowder. Old coffee and the metallic tang of blood. Elias was alive. He lay on the cot, his breathing shallow, lost in a fever dream. Clara sat beside him, her hands raw and trembling, clasped in her lap. She had not left his side. She had spent the long, cold hours after the fight watching his chest rise and fall. A terrifying, precious rhythm. Major Smith sat at his telegraph desk, his shotgun across his knees. He was drinking coffee, black and bitter. Nora was asleep in a chair, her own shotgun still clutched in her hands. Mecco was gone. He had slipped out before dawn. To see the world, he had said. Silas Crowell and Jeb Caro were tied, back to back, to the heavy iron stove. Caro was unconscious, his mangled hands wrapped in bloody rags. Crowell was awake. He was no longer the arrogant banker. He was a gray, hollowed-out man. He stared at Clara with empty, defeated eyes. "They will come," Smith said, his voice a low rumble. Denver acknowledged. "They are sending the marshals." You will all hang for this," Crowell whispered. His voice was a dry rattle. "You assaulted me. You stole my property." "You be quiet, Silas," Nora said, her eyes snapping open. She had not been asleep. "You are done. Your paper lies are all burned up." The sound of horses came, a lot of them, moving fast. Clara's heart seized. She looked at Elias, then at the door. Smith stood. That will be them. He unbarred the door. It was not a posse. It was 8 men, wearing the badges of United States Marshals, their oilskin coats spattered with mud. They were led by the county sheriff, a man Clara had last seen drinking Crowell's whiskey. The sheriff's face was pale and grim. He had clearly been given his orders by a higher authority. "Major Smith," the lead marshal said, his voice flat. "Marshal?" Smith nodded. He gestured with his shotgun. "The prisoners are here, Silas Crowell, Jeb Caro, and the evidence is on the table." The marshals were efficient, their movements devoid of emotion. They put Crowell in irons. They hauled the moaning, semi-conscious Caro to his feet. Crowell made one last, desperate attempt. "Sheriff, you know me. This is a misunderstanding. This half-breed, this savage, they attacked me." The sheriff looked at Silas Crowell, the man who had owned him, the man who had owned the whole town. He looked at the federal marshals. He looked at the charred surveyor's stake, at Nora's handwritten logbook, and at the warped, mud-stained pages of the ledger. "It is over, Mr. Crowell," the sheriff said, his voice quiet. "You are under federal arrest." They took them away. As they dragged Crowell out the door, his eyes met Clara's. She felt nothing, not pity, not triumph, just the quiet, empty relief of a heavy weight being set down. The ride back to Animus Crossing was a strange, silent procession. The marshals rode in a grim wedge. Clara and Nora rode beside a litter they had built for Elias. Major Smith had given them laudanum for his pain, and he was sleeping, his face pale as wax. Mecco had reappeared on the trail, as if from the earth itself, and he scouted their perimeter, his eyes watching for any of Caro's men who might still be loose. When they reached the town, the news had already, somehow, preceded them. People came out of the saloon, out of the general store. They stood in the muddy street, silent. They watched the man who had been their master, their kind owner, ride past in chains. They saw Silas Crowell, not as a pillar of the community, but as a prisoner. The marshals padlocked the bank. They nailed a federal seizure notice to the door of the land office. They arrested Mr. Finch, who wept and pleaded. They arrested Surveyor Harris, who tried to run. Clara saw her father. He was standing on the boardwalk, his face a mask of confusion and terror. He saw her, dressed in the tattered, soot-stained trousers, her hair shorn short where the embers had burned it. He looked at her as if she were a ghost. She just looked back, her face steady. She was not his daughter. She was not his asset to be sold. She was herself. She turned her horse and rode on. The trial was held 2 weeks later, not in Animas Crossing, but in Durango, in a proper federal courthouse. Elias was there. He was alive. He sat in the courtroom, his arm in a sling, his side heavily bandaged, but his gray eyes were clear and steady. Clara was the first witness. When she walked to the stand, a hush fell over the room. This was the naked bride. This was the kidnapped woman. She was wearing a simple, dark blue dress, one she had sewn herself. She looked, as Crowell had once said, practical. She did not weep. She did not raise her voice. She simply told the truth. She held up the green ledger. She told them about the unlocked safe, about the fake priest, about the threat to her father. She told them about the burned camp. She told them about the murdered mail rider. She told them about the fight in the pass. Her voice was the voice of a seamstress, precise, steady, and devastating. She was not a victim. She was the witness. Meko testified. He did not speak of treaties. He spoke of his grandfathers. He spoke of the migration of the elk. He held up the charred surveyor's stake, the one with the ACR brand. He placed it on the table before the judge. It was an accusation more powerful than any speech. Nora testified. She read from her logbook. October 6th, S.C. and Harris. 3 hours. Whiskey. Mentioned reroute. October 9th. J.C. paid 5 men. Bragged about clearing squatters. The verdict was absolute. Silas Crowell was found guilty of conspiracy, land fraud, incitement to riot, and accessory to murder. Jeb Caro, his hands wrapped in bandages, was found guilty of arson, attempted murder, and the murder of Tom Jeffords. They were sentenced to life in the federal prison at Yuma. As they were led away, Crowell, for the first time, looked broken. He had lost his paper, his money, his power. It had all been undone by a woman with a needle and a man who believed in the land. The land itself was the next to heal. The rains that had saved them had also quenched the fire, but it had left a 10-mile scar of black. Skeletal trees. Meko and his people returned to their valley. The first thing they did was not to rebuild. They held a ceremony. It was not a dance. It was a planting. They had gathered pine saplings from the unburned ridges. Elias was there. His arm was still in a sling, but his feet were firm on the earth. He stood beside Meko, the Cheyenne people, who had once seen him as an outsider, a half-blood, now saw him as a brother. He was the bridge. Meko gave the first sapling to Clara. She knelt in the soft, wet, ashen soil. Meko, and Elias planted that first tree together, near the creek, where the fire had been hottest. It was a small, green, hopeful thing in a world of black. Animas Crossing began to change. With Crowell's bank seized, the town's economy had collapsed, but it was being reborn. Nora O'Malley's saloon, the Silver Slipper, became the new town hall. She did not just sell whiskey. She started a class. One evening, Clara walked in. She saw Nora, her spectacles on her nose, standing in front of a blackboard, sitting at the tables, not with cards, but with slate pencils, were 3 minors and 2 of her saloon girls. "No, Jed," Nora was saying, her voice firm. "The word is truth, Truth. It does not sound like it is spelled. Most important words do not. Now, write it." A new bookshelf had been hammered to the far wall. "Nora," Clara smiled. "What is that?" "That," Nora said, gesturing, "is the Animas Crossing Public Library, first edition." She winked. "And I had the blacksmith line the back of it with a sheet of iron, just in case any of our new students get rowdy. A bulletproof library, only the best for this town." Clara laughed. It felt good. She walked, alone, down the main street. The air was cool. It was autumn. People nodded to her. They did not whisper. They did not stare with pity. They looked at her with a quiet, profound respect. She was Miss Mayfield, the woman who had saved the valley. She stopped at her old shop. It was boarded up, a notice of bank seizure on the door. She still had her key. She let herself in. It was dark, dusty. It smelled of memory and old cloth. The white silk dress, the one Caro had ripped, was still in a heap on the floor. She looked at it for a moment, then ignored it. She walked to her sewing basket, the one Caro had dumped. She knelt. Her copy of Middlemarch was there, its spine broken. She left it. She reached deep into the jumble of thread and scraps. Her fingers closed around cold, familiar steel, her shears, her heavy, practical, 8-inch sewing scissors. She stood. She felt the weight of them in her hand. They were a tool. They were her tool. They were not a weapon, not a rifle. They were for building, for making things whole, for mending, for cutting a new pattern. She walked out of the shop, leaving the key in the door, and did not look back. Elias returned to Hawk's spine. The climb was slow. His side ached, and his shoulder was stiff, but he was healing. He reached the cabin. It was just as he had left it, cold, silent, and empty. For the first time in his life, the emptiness felt wrong. It was not peace. It was just quiet. He had grown used to the sound of her breathing. He had grown used to her sharp, practical voice. He missed, he realized with a strange ache, her terrible coffee. He spent the first day mending. He repaired the door Caro's men had shot. He replaced the shutter. He cleaned the hearth. He found the rough wool cloak, the one he had thrown around her. That first day, it was stiff with mud and soot. He took it to the spring and washed it. He worked the fabric, his hands gentle, until it was clean. He took it inside. He was going to fold it and put it away. He stopped. He looked up at the main rafter beam, the one that ran across the center of the cabin. He did not fold the cloak. He took it, and with 2 loops of leather cord, he hung it. He stretched it out, like a banner, from the beam. It hung in the center of the room, a reminder, a testament. It was the proof of their beginning. He stepped back. The cloak softened the harsh light from the window. It made the cold stone cabin feel, for the first time, like a home. He sat at his table, looking at the cloak, and he began to wait. The autumn came on slowly, washing the high country in shades of gold and wine. The scar on the pass, where the fire had raged, was a stark, black reminder. But the rains had been kind. New grass, thin and green, pushed up through the ash. In the Antelope Valley, the surveyor's flags were gone. The half-built foundation of Crowell's Depot stood like a rotten tooth, a monument to a dead ambition. The railroad, under federal review, had been sharply rerouted. It would now go north, over the old pass, the expensive, difficult route it should have taken all along. It completely avoided the valley. One evening in late September, Elias and Clara stood on the ridge above the valley. They did not need a spyglass. A great, slow-moving river of shadow was flowing onto the meadow. The elk had returned. They moved past the graves of Meko's ancestors, undisturbed, following the path their mothers had shown them. The land was theirs again. The rhythm was restored. They did not marry in a church. There was no white silk, no trembling father, no paper contract signed under duress. They were married on the ridge of Hawk's Spine, the place Elias called home, on a cold, bright October afternoon. The wind was sharp, but the sun was warm. The only witnesses were Nora, her iron-gray hair braided neatly, and Meko, who stood before them, not as a priest, but as a friend. Clara wore the practical wool trousers and the linen shirt Elias had given her, mended and clean. Elias wore his best tanned buckskins. Meko did not speak of God. He spoke of the land. "The earth holds us," he said, his voice quiet but carrying on the wind. "The wind teaches us. The fire tests us. You have both been tested by the fire. You have proven you are strong enough for the earth." He did not ask them to exchange rings. He held out a knife. It was an old, beautifully crafted Cheyenne blade, the handle wrapped in blue beads. "This is the tool that feeds the family," he said. He gave it to Elias. "You will provide, you will protect." Elias took the knife. He looked not at Meko, but at Clara. "I will," he said. Meko then presented a long, sharp steel sewing awl, its wooden handle worn smooth. "This is the tool that builds the home," he said. He gave it to Clara. "You will build, you will make whole." Clara took the awl. She looked at Elias. "I will." "You are two people," Meko said. "Now, you are one shelter." Elias reached out. He did not kiss her. He took her hand, the one holding the awl, and held it. It was a promise, hard as steel, strong as thread. Clara did not remain on the mountain. She was a woman of the town, just as he was a man of the mountain. They found a balance. She opened a shop. It was not the small, dark room wedged between the blacksmith and the land office. It was the old land office itself. The marshals had auctioned its contents, and Nora, flush with the reward money the railroad had quietly paid her for her testimony, had bought the building. The sign read, "Mayfield and O'Malley Fine Stitching and Saddle Repair." Clara was practical. Animas Crossing was a horse town. It needed saddle repairs more than it needed fine dresses. She bought the blacksmith's old stitching horses and tools. She hired 2 other women, widows of a mine collapse, who had strong hands. She taught them to stitch heavy leather. She hung her heavy steel shears on a hook by the door. They were a symbol of her new life. Honest work, chosen freely. Elias, too, found a new path. He could not, he found, return to his old solitude. The silence of the cabin was only peaceful when he knew Clara would be returning to it. He started a class. He did not call it that. But one Saturday, Meko brought 3 Cheyenne boys to the base of Hawk's spine. "Teach them," Meko said. "Teach them the white man's ways of tracking, so they are never surprised again." Elias agreed, as he was teaching them to read the boot prints of a shod horse. 2 boys from the town, miners' sons, showed up, watching silently. "Can you teach us to catch rabbits?" one asked. Elias looked at the Cheyenne boys. He looked at the white boys. They were all just boys, hungry for knowledge. "All right," he said. "The first rule is silence. The second is to look, not with your eyes, with your feet. Feel the ground. It talks." He became the bridge, not between governments, but between children. He taught them which plants were medicine and which were poison. He taught them how to read the clouds. He taught them respect for the land, not as property, but as a living thing. The final piece of the old world fell into place a month later. A letter arrived, not by stage, but by the official Federal Express, bearing the seal of the United States Attorney's Office in Denver. It came to Clara, at her shop. She opened it, her hands, now calloused from leatherwork, steady. It was a long, formal document. It spoke of the convictions. It spoke of the seized assets of Silas Crowell, which were being liquidated to repay the debts he had incurred, including the full, fraudulent claim against her father. Her father, she had heard, had quietly left town, moving east, shamed and broken, but free of his debt. The letter ended with a formal commendation. It announced a reward, posted by the railroad for uncovering the fraud, $500. It was awarded, the letter stated, to Miss Clara Mayfield for her courage, her integrity, and her willingness to uphold the law in the face of grave personal danger. It named her first, not as an asset, not as a bride, but as the agent of the change. That night, she did not stay in town. She rode up the mountain path. It was easy now. She knew the way by heart. Elias was waiting for her on the small porch he had built. The air was sharp, smelling of pine and the first hint of snow. He had a fire going. He was, to her relief, not cooking. He was just waiting. She sat beside him, on the rough bench. She did not need to tell him about the letter. He already knew. The news had traveled faster than her horse. For a long time, they just sat, watching the stars. 1 billion cold. Sharp diamonds in the black sky. The quiet was comfortable. It was earned. Hanging above them, from the main rafter, the old wool cloak stirred in the faint breeze. It was their banner. "It is truly over," Clara said, her voice quiet. "Yes," he said. She pulled the telegraph paper from her pocket. The one from Major Smith, the one that had saved them. It was folded, worn at the creases. She read it aloud, her voice clear in the cold air. "Instigator Silas Crowell. Am holding key witnesses, including Nora O'Malley and Clara Mayfield. Send federal marshals." She refolded it. "It all came down to this piece of paper. His paper was lies. Ours was the truth." "It was not the paper. Clara," Elias said. He turned to her. His gray eyes, which she had once thought were cold, were full of a deep, steady warmth. "It was you. You were the truth." She had set the boundary, respect, before anything else. Now, sitting on their porch, free of debt, free of fear, she leaned her head against his shoulder. He put his arm, his good arm, around her. It felt solid. It felt like home. "We chose this," she whispered. "No debt, no fear. We chose each other." He said, the West was still wild. It was still a hard country, a place of sharp edges and sudden violence. But that night, on the high ridge, justice had found a foothold. It had a place, Elias thought, as long as people were willing to respect the land, as long as they were willing to respect each other. Below them, in the dark valley, the small, green sapling they had planted took root in the ash. In the town, a pair of steel shears hung by a door, waiting for honest work. And in the cabin, an old wool cloak hung from the rafters, a promise kept. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from, so we can all connect. Please consider subscribing to my channel, Wild West Tales, and like this video. If you enjoyed it, please also hit that hype button to help this story be heard by many more people.